No fun whatsoever.
How's it going, Dave?
Well, my son was up from Colorado last week, so I
Big
thought we were gonna
presentation
get
with you tonight?
yeah, he came to Washington. He had a couple days to put something on, and he was working on it.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. So welcome to the planning board this evening. I really do appreciate you being here, especially given it's not the best night in the world at the moment. We have an agenda before us at this point. I'm just going to ask my board to approve the agenda as submitted if you're so inclined.
So moved.
And I hear a motion made and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Before we get into our business, one thing that we're going to do tonight, David Gray, who's the director of the sewer department, has been good enough to come on down and talk to us for a bit. We've sent him some questions beforehand, and so we'd like to turn things over to you for a bit, David, if you don't mind. Thank you so much for being here, by the way.
Well, thank you, everyone, for having me. I don't know how you want to start, Barry, if you want to
I'm going to
hand
just
off the questions or...
No, I'm going to let you dive right in. You've been given the questions beforehand, and you probably have a sense of how you'd like to proceed to work the story at this point. So the floor is yours, and I'll gladly open things up to you, sir.
Well, I appreciate everyone, and I know some of you. I don't know everybody, but thank you for having me. I did receive the questions ahead of schedule here, so I could was able to get them down on paper and not tend to meander like I do. As many people know, when it comes to sewers, I could stand here all night long and talk. No problem. I know one of the questions was one of the, could I explain what the difference between a wastewater system and a sanitary waste system are? They are one and the same. The only two differences that are out there is a sanitary sewer and a stormwater sewer are different. Some states allow combined sewers. We don't in Massachusetts. We are, I can't say 100% separated because we do have some cross connections that we're aware of here and there that we're trying to solve. But the sanitary sewers, or as we call it, the collection system in our terms, is what we manage on top of the wastewater plants and all the pumping stations. A little background for some that might not know is we have two wastewater facilities on the island, one in town, 4 million gallon a day capacity, and we have one in Sconset, which is about 300,000 gallons a day in the summer, and in the wintertime it's 15,000 gallons a day. That plant is very tricky to manage because we have to basically feed it in the wintertime to maintain our biology. So we use supplemental carbon sources from glycerin from some of the biodiesel people that make biodiesel on the island to brew waste, or we purchased different carbon sources to help feed that plant to keep it alive. We have 17 pump stations across the island scattered throughout. Some of them you can't even tell are there. Other ones are the bigger ones like C Street, Surfside, or out at North Shop are some of our bigger stations. We did just recently add 2 more pump stations in the Monomoy Shimo area for that project. So that adds to our list to give us a total of 17. We have over 70 miles of sewers on the island that we maintain with a crew. We have a special collections crew that is specially trained that handle a lot of that. So I'll just stick with the questions for now, and then we can get into other, if people have comments or questions going along.
Yeah, I'm going to let you run, like I said, run the ship.
Okay.
So
You all want to be here all night? I'm good.
no. You do have a half an hour because we have a lot of business, but
I don't
please.
know if I can do it in a half an hour. So, one of the questions was kind of a tricky question, but are all the problems from January's catastrophic failure in the sewer system now fixed? The problem we had with the failure of the force main has been repaired. Are all the problems fixed? No. The line is actually repaired. It has been tested, and it has been used off and on. The forensic report that we have on the force main states that we're only to use it in case of emergency. So we're not using that 16-inch force main as a primary line like we did before. We're using the 20-inch ductile line that goes up over Chicken Hill and out the backside to the plant. We have the ability to use the 16-inch force main that ruptured, but we're going to do that very limitedly and sparingly as needed. So it is fixed. It's all back together. What we did during that whole process is we videoed all 18,000 linear feet of it and cleaned it and cameraed it. And even if we saw a slight scratch on the camera, we cut it out. If it could have been there for 30 years, we cut it out and put a new piece of pipe in. So any deformity, scratch, crack, or anything was cut out and replaced. We did that 19 different times. It was 19 pits where we actually cut open and fixed something. This next question it's one of the rabbit hole questions, but is the sewer system still at risk of future breaks, problems because of its age and condition? The way I can answer that question is there's always the risk for something to go wrong, break, leak, or fail. We have failures at the plant every day with electric motors, pumps, electrical components fail on a daily basis. Pipes break, pipes get hit during construction and broken. So something is always at risk. Something can go wrong every day. It's just part of the business that we're in. As hard as we plan to go through the day to do something, our schedules get diverted every day. So that's a question and it's a serious concern that that the infrastructure is old. We still have a lot of circa 1920 sewers in town. I have some maps I'm going to show in a few minutes just of some of the stuff that we're currently working on now. As you may be aware, we're under a consent order by EPA with certain guidelines and restrictions that we have to do. We were mandated to go into a CMOM program, which is Collections, Maintenance, Operations, and Management program. We had to provide the state with a manual in March, another one in April that states on staffing, training, continuing education, SOPs for every single thing that we do. It's a living document that will be going on for the next 20 years probably. Every year we have to update it in March. We also have a monthly meeting, a mandatory report every March to EPA and DEP that we have to follow. That came out of the fact that we had a 1930 sewer main fail on on Flora Street a couple of years ago that caused a couple of overflows into the harbor. And that was how EPA was able to, and DEP were able to control some of the stuff we did. Every community in the state of Massachusetts eventually has to do a CMOM program. We were just prompted to do it much quicker than everybody else. Over the last winter, we CCTV'd 100,000 linear feet of sewer lines on the island. We did the entire village of Sconset, and we did some of the high priority and concerned areas of projects that could be coming forward here in the near future. The National Grid L8 project, we CCTV'd that entire route so we know what's in the ground. Some of the other areas we CCTV'd were where the water company is planning on doing some water replacements. I'm working very closely with Mark now, and we're doing a bunch of combined projects going forward from now on. One of them hopefully will be starting this winter sometime up in the North Liberty area. Mark and I are on the same page with a lot of the different things, so it makes sense to go in and fix everything once, then pave it, and then we're done for 20 years or 30 years. One of the other questions had to do with the ZBA and the Surfside Crossing project. The question was, is their existing sewer system does not have capacity and sanitary waste from the size of the project? There was discussions of possible new systems provided by them or proposed by them. That proposed 40B is a concern, and it's limited currently right now because currently they have no viable sewer connection based on some of our downstream analysis reports and the age of the two force mains that are on their property. They cannot touch those. We're prohibiting them from touching those. And the other force main on the other side of South Shore Road in the bike path area is the force main that comes from the Noshop pump station that we actually just connected Monomoy into. We're taking the Monomoy flows and Schimmel flows out of C Street and we're putting them directly to the plant. So that force main is at capacity as well now. So the other option for that development at some point in time going forward, if that goes forward, will be some form of a new sewer system to the plant or other ways or other means. We don't know yet. We don't have any definitive plans from them yet. So that's one of the other things that I've been working on. One of the questions was about extending the sewer to Nantucket. The system does have capacity. The Nantucket area, as well as a lot of the other needs areas, and Andrew is well aware of the needs areas and stuff like that going forward. Those flows, those estimated flow capacities are all part of the limits that we have at the plant. So those flow numbers are already calculated, and when we start to add other areas outside those needs areas is when we start to get into the questionable, do we have capacity or whatever at the plant. Currently, we have a permit for 4 million gallons a day at the plant, and with this summer, we went over 2 million gallons twice, all summer long, because it was so dry. Which leads me to believe that we have a lot of II issues. A lot of rainwater still gets into the system due to cracked pipes and old pipes. This year was very dry, so our numbers were down considerably. And we also believe that the voluntary restriction that we had asked for when the sewer force main ruptured for people to conserve water, we think people are still conserving water, because it certainly is. Our numbers are down some, and so are Mark's. So someone's doing something right, which is great for us. One of the questions, existing wastewater and sanitary sewer systems have limited capacity. How would that capacity be increased? And what would have to be done, and who would pay for it? That's a good question, and we are undertaking right now a sewer master plan program with an engineering firm. They're going to take a look, and I'm going to give you the map here in a second to show you what they're going to be looking at. They're not only going to look at all the needs areas, but they're going to look at all the areas that are already sewered. And as part of the CMON program, they can take that data and utilize it for models and to run all kinds of models and variables and for rainstorms and major snow events or whatever like that, so that we'll know what the capacities are in our sewers. Some of our sewers in the reports now, we have some concerns on Bartlett Road. We have some concerns on Surfside Road. And I have a downstream analysis report that says what some of these concerns are, which means we upsize the pipes. Vesper Lane, as part of the Shimo project, originally was a 6-inch and an 8-inch main on that road. We put in a brand new 12-inch, anticipating for future flows. But at the end of it, the Surfside Road, we tied into an 8-inch main, because Surfside Road is 8-inch. So that's part of our analysis. That's part of some capital projects that I put forward already for funding. One of the things that might drive us a little quicker on the Surfside Road area is the development of that roundabout. Because if they go forward with the roundabout, we have to do our work before they get into doing that work. And that Surfside Road could also be a potential route for a brand new force main that we're going to be going into planning for as well. One of the questions asked, wanted to explain how myself and the water company are working together. Mark and I I have his 10-year capital plan. He has my 10-year capital plan. We've been meeting very frequently with Rob from the DPW as well, so that all three of us are on board with projects going forward. Rob might have an asphalt project coming up for a repavement. He asks us if we have anything coming up, and if we do, he'll put his asphalting off until the next year or 2 years down the road, so that we don't have to pave it and then dig it back up. A couple of the roads that still haven't been fully paved is Atlantic Ave and Prospect Street. Those two areas could be potential routes for a new sewer force main, and we have to replace the sewers in those areas. So that's why we've held off on paving those. I know some of them are a little bumpy, but if we were to get that paved and I was come behind them next year and start digging it up again, I'm sure I would be chased out of town. One of the other questions that Nat had, which was a good question, I just want to hand these out, is we just purchased a brand new CCTV truck. It's a closed circuit television truck for being able to do sewer scopes and video sewers. This is some examples. Those are some examples of sewers that we just recently did camera. We're aware of some hot spots on the island. We typically get a phone call saying, "Oh, my house is backed up," and we'll go down, and we know it's a hot spot, so we put it on a routine maintenance. We're constantly down there jetting or rodding these lines. Those particular pictures there, most of those are from Vestal Street. Vestal Street sewer main is just about completely crushed, and in some spots you can see it's collapsed. That was originally put in 1923. So that's on our hot list to get replaced. It's on our list of sewer main replacements to come up. But the camera truck has also found some other stuff that we didn't know we had some major concerns with. So you're going to start to see the truck on the road here in the next couple of weeks. I have 5 guys that are fully trained in the vehicle and the software program that's on board. They're all NASCO certified operators, so we will be able to answer a lot of questions that we've never been able to answer before. We're not going to operate in the blind anymore. And then the other question was wanted me to try to explain how the force main break was not due to amount of new overgrowth, as many keep saying. The forensic analysis report from the sewer force main rupture stated that the rupture was caused due to faulty joint welds, inappropriately installed welds or cold weld joints. It had nothing really to do with the amount of flows that were going through, because that line had been the primary line for the last 10 years since I've been here. One of the things that could have contributed to that failure, because of that amount of flooding that we had, the rapid increase of that flooding, and we get nailed really hard when we get flooding down in that whole area by II. It's getting into the system. We found 11 areas where it was getting into the system by smoke testing the whole neighborhood. But it was cold shock. Everything was so cold. It was 26 degrees, the water that was going out to the sewer plant. And polyethylene pipe expands and contracts. So could that have helped contribute to the break? Possibly, but the forensic report does say that it was faulty welds on the joints. Some of the things that I have in process now, we're going to be doing a sewer master plan. I did mention the CMOM program some. We have currently underway with an $8.8 million upgrade at the plant that's supposed to end in April, that contract. The C Street pump station was just turned over to us last week. That pump station now is fully under the control of the town. They're taking care of punch list stuff right now. That facility, if anyone hasn't been down by there or whatever, there wasn't much done to the exterior of the building as far as alterations. The one thing that is a little different is the bottom of the building's a little wider. We installed a 2.5 foot thick concrete wall. It's a flood wall around the entire structure, which is also structurally tied into the existing building that was installed in the early 1900s. So if we do get any high flood waters, the original floor level of that pump station was elevation 5. The new flood level maps show that area to be at elevation 9. So we were already 4 foot under the elevation of the FEMA maps. So we have designed that facility now that we have stop logs that can go into 2 of the doorways. So water cannot get into the building once we put it into storm mode. And the way that project was designed was we designed it with dry pit submersible pumps. So all the pumping equipment that's in the basement of that structure is designed to operate underwater. So there's no electrical connections in the water zone. So if that building was to flood, the pumps would keep on going, unless we lost power. But we have our own standby generator down there. So with that, I could keep going on and on, Andrew, but I don't know if anyone else has any couple of questions or comments, but.
Unless there's anything else you want to touch on real quickly.
I just wanted to show, I got a couple of different maps, and I wanted to show what the CMOM program's doing or what it tells us. So I have a couple of maps that the engineering firm has come up, and it's telling us one of the technologies that I have never seen and actually used is some of this cured in place pipe patches where you don't actually have to go in and excavate the streets. You actually pull a liner in, and then you inflate it, and it's full of resin. It's a structural resin. And then you go in afterwards with a little tractor and you drill the holes out where the laterals are. So some of the recommendations on these plans say that that's what we should do. We should do some slip lining. We should possibly do some pipe bursting. I don't know if anyone experienced the pipe bursting that was done on Orange Street. Nat probably did.
I know.
A few years ago. Pretty interesting stuff. They actually went in and they pulled another pipe inside the old one, then went back and drilled holes. So there's technologies out there besides full excavation digs that we're exploring.
Did you want to do the maps real quickly?
I can just hand them, but you guys can pass them
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
One thing to say, too, is that the town manager extended the invitation if we ever wanted to have a joint meeting with the sewer commissioners. They'd be happy to do that.
Great.
Okay.
That first big map is a sewer master plan, kind of lays everything out. And then these are some of the maps that we have from the consultant of what's going on with the Seymour. This is all areas that have all been cambered.
So these are the different types of repairs
I've got
that they
a
can
couple of
do.
questions. Are you going to address the maps, or are you
I
just?
can, if you have general questions, I can come over and kind of talk about.
I need to be a little careful here. The town manager has really wanted these questions in advance.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's why I keep asking you guys in advance of doing this. And the other thing is, we really have a pretty intense meeting before us at this point, so I want to be a little sensitive.
I'm more than welcome to come back at some time. Like I said, Libby
Yeah.
has offered for joint
There-
meetings with everybody.
I can go out.
I do offer
You
tours all the
can
time.
Rule me out of order, but because we didn't have a quorum last night at town meeting, and one of the things we would have voted on was the funding, if it's legitimate, I couldn't have asked that before. Just wondered what the implications of that would be. Is
The,
that acceptable, or
I mean, the implications of the article
the
itself?
fact
That's
that
gonna
that we
pass the
couldn't
ballot.
pass it because there wasn't
Those
a quorum
appropriation ones
last
won't be
night?
on the ballot.
Yeah.
So it does have implications. I was hoping to have been able to get that funding to go right into the design process. Design itself will probably take anywhere from 8 months to a year or better just to design. We have to plan out the routes. I have 2 proposed routes of where what I think is the best route out of town. And my thinking on my 2 routes coming out of town is all the roads that I've picked to come out also need sewers replaced and water mains replaced.
Yep.
So, one of my routes is Center Street, Lily Street, Gardner Street, Vestal, all the way out Prospect. All those areas need to have sewers replaced. So, try to do multiple things at the same time. The thing with last night's meeting now is it's going to delay us. As it's concerning that it's going to delay us, but we'll do the best we can to move forward and present it at the annual town meeting in April.
Well, we were there. We were hoping.
So, now, and like I said, questions were really supposed to be coming from the
Yeah.
board, and we're supposed to prepare them in advance. So, I want to say thank you very much to David for being here. One thing I will certainly mention to the board, he has availed himself to give you a tour of the plant.
Yeah.
Make that happen. It's definitely, he's a really good tour guide, but it's one of the most fascinating things I've ever seen, just from a technology standpoint and understanding how the system works. So thank you, David, and I also want to just publicly kind of thank Libby as well too for letting us keep going with this program with the different town managers, because for us this is important information.
Well, I appreciate it, and anytime you guys have projects coming up and you want me to, I'll gladly show up to stress concerns or any issues that I might have.
Great, and
But I'm always open for questions. Most people know where I am.
Yep.
So
and if you guys are inclined, I think probably in the next few months we'll definitely make something happen with the sewer commissioners as well too, and have a little dialogue and see where that all takes us out to. Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jeff.
Well, it was wonderful to find out why Atlantic Ave hasn't been repaved. I ride my bike on it, and I'm like, no wonder people are riding in the middle of the road, you can't ride on the side of it, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Thank you. All right, so that's going to bring us to minutes, and there were minutes from Catherine. Where are you? I'm sorry. There you go. I just want to verify the list.
September 10th, September 6th, and June 11th.
All right. So if you've had a chance to review those, is there any errors or omissions as submitted?
Could I ask that we
Yeah.
hold it over? It came in as I was going out the door to come
Sure.
to the meeting here, so I couldn't read them, so I can't really express an opinion.
Yeah. You guys good with that? We'll just
Yep.
hold them?
Sure.
Yep.
All right. So Catherine, we'll just toss those onto next month's agenda. Thank you. All right, beautiful. All right, so it's going to bring us to A&Rs. You've got 14 A&Rs before you at this point. I've had a request that two of them, one of the members is going to recuse for. Is there anything else you want to isolate out from this group?
8290.
8290. Okay. Anything else?
Okay.
All right, so let me, we'll save 8290 to the end. So 8287, 8288, Ms. Trudell's going to recuse from those, so, and you've got the report from the staff. So what's the pleasure of the board on those two?
Make a motion to endorse.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. And then that's going to bring us from 8279 to 8292. Pleasure of the board on these.
279. Oh, okay. I'll make a motion to endorse.
Okay. And do I hear a second to that?
Second.
Discussion on the issue? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously, and that brings us to 8290. Sir?
I looked through it. There was a lot of material, pictures, and I just was hoping for an explanation of exactly what was going on, or this. It looked like it's a, as I recall, it's a small lot building, small, even smaller, building in the back, and the just trying to understand what is the intended use and how the pre-existing building relates to size of the building lot. In other words, the lot A is 2384 square feet. So the pre-existing non-conforming building and use, what does that exempt us from? Everything?
So, Holly or Leslie?
It's a 4181L under subdivision regulations.
Could you speak up just to hear? I'm sorry, I don't have real.
4181L under subdivision.
Yep.
Regulations. Both these structures were in place at the adoption of the subdivision control law in 1955.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, a burden of proof is on the applicant to provide that these are the exact same structures that were there in 1955, which they have. Staff would have given them a recommendation if they did not. Pretty extensive, as you can see, as well as the detailed chronology of the structure itself. So these are typical. You've seen many of these come in before. You're probably going to see a lot more as people realize that this is something that's allowed under the subdivision control law.
So there's no limitation on the use, no limitation, I mean,
The limitation on the use is, I mean, the zoning does apply. The buildings are pre-existing non-conforming. If they're converted to other uses, they have to meet building codes. They may need further relief from the zoning board, depends on what's happening. But when they're allowed to be simply put on their own individual lots under this particular chapter of the state statute.
okay.
So,
So if you had a pre-existing building that was a garage, for instance, so it would get separated into its own lot.
Yep.
Now somebody wants to convert that to a dwelling.
yep.
They'd have to come back?
Well, they may, if they're, for example, they may not meet the building code if they have windows along certain parts of it. Windows for a garage are one thing, as opposed to windows for a dwelling. So the building might need to be repositioned, or they may need to come in for a new permit and site a building with the appropriate setbacks. So typically those go to the ZBA for relief.
Okay.
But they're, in a situation like this, unless the building is just staying unchanged, it involves permitting and further relief.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right.
That was my question.
Good.
I just have a quick question on that, just so I understand. So let's say, for instance, the existing garage is removed and a structure is going to go in, let's say a single-family dwelling or rental unit, however you want to put it. Would that new structure be required to fit the zoning for an area like that as far as setbacks and ground cover?
Yes.
Or would those be waived?
No, they would have to meet the setbacks and ground cover, parking requirements.
Okay,
and-
okay, great,
Yep.
great.
Okay. All right, so what's the pleasure of the board on this one?
And move we approve.
All right, so it's moved.
Second.
Yeah, so endorsement for made and seconded discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Great. All right, second dwelling applications. There is, yeah, there we go. So there's one I'm going to take out of order, which is 281 Hummock Pond Road, because one of the members wants to recuse again. Is there anything else in here that you need to isolate out? Do you want to discuss? Yes, ma'am.
30 codfish.
Dirty codfish. Okay.
And, bless you.
Yeah, let's find the application.
I also had a broad question, maybe, I don't know if that's appropriate.
All right, well, 30
Yeah.
codfish is continued.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna
So
say, I can't find it.
that'll be for next month.
The broader question, if that's in order just to understand whether to pull any of the others, is so many of these haven't provided site plans and parking, and the staff report says they need to do that, but I find it kind of impossible to review them without having the site plan and parking, and wonder whether we should simply have a rule of thumb that if they don't have that, they're not fully complete, and they shouldn't be allowed to be put on the agenda, if that would provide more incentive for whoever's proposing them to actually do the requisite work before we have to go through this twice.
That's probably going to be a really good policy question to bring up, is what I'm feeling. So,
That's why I raise it, but
Yeah, I
I
hear
know
you.
you're not going to want to take each of these now, but I just don't want to lose that point, because it kept up, I think
If-
there's 4 or 5 of these that.
yeah, I mean, I'll put it to this way. If you want to isolate those out and feel like you can't make a vote on it, I mean, you could either, choose to vote in the negative, or you could recuse from them. And then, let's have a little policy discussion about it afterwards. Which, yes, ma'am,
May I just give them how we've been handling these historically?
please.
You all have basically approved these. One is that you need revised site plans. That's why it's indicated clearly what the changes are and what we're needing it for. If you do approve these, then we let the applicant know, hey, we need a revised plan to address X, Y, and Z. And actually, sometimes we get them between, when staff report goes out and actually the meeting. But that will help expedite things. So, I mean, we're not gonna issue them without getting approval, that's not how we've been doing it historically.
Well, just say for my own mind, if I don't have the site plan, I don't have the parking, I sort of wonder what it is that I'm meaningfully trying to review. So as a matter of policy, I'd like to vote no on any now and in the future if that's not there. So I don't know if this is a plain majority or supermajority, but I don't think you have a lot of leverage. I also think it's really unfair for people to give you that on the fly after you've done the staff report, because you don't get the staff report material really lined up until pretty close to the meeting. So I think I don't understand why people don't realize they need to do that. Is there something I'm missing about why they don't understand that?
So I think what I want to do is I want to take this to a different level.
All right.
And like I said, just like we've been doing some of
Okay,
our other things now,
sure.
is set up a meeting above and beyond
Okay,
and really begin to hash this out on a policy level decision.
all right, but
Well, I
just
went-
for what it's worth, I'm going to vote no on them.
And I understand, no, that's fine. That's why I said you can certainly decide how you want
Okay.
to do it. It's simple majority on these, mind
Yep,
you.
fine.
Okay?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I also have a question which relates generally to all the secondary dwellings, but I also support Judith in her concern. We're all trying to be diligent in understanding that we have a long agenda, and we have, but trying to be diligent in understanding what it is that we're approving, and so we just have to have the information, and the applications have to be complete. Otherwise, I feel that we're just adopting things perhaps somewhat blindly. The specific question then that I have, which, well, and I would say if we're going to have that policy discussion, I'd like
Right.
to have it before before we're presented with secondary dwelling applications at the next meeting.
Okay, I hear you. The only thing I want to say is personally, I understand you're operating blindly, but you're not really operating blindly because staff is still reviewing.
I understand that.
That's okay. So I just want to be clear how that's being phrased as well too. Because there is a,
I'm not suggesting the staff,
okay.
in
That's okay.
any way, the
Mr.
staff
Chair?
isn't doing their job.
No, okay.
That,
Excuse me, Mr.
in no way whatsoever.
Yeah.
I'm
I
just simply
just
saying-
wanted, in past meetings over the years, I think one of the reasons is, and I'm not making excuses, expense. A lot of the applicants are looking to get an approval before they spend excess amount of dollars on surveying and engineer costs, only to have it nullified and they've already spent that money. So there's a rationale behind there. But again, as Mr. Chair, Rector says, some of the applicants, if we approve it, they still have to meet all the criteria through the planning to get the parking. So we're putting maybe the cart before the horse, but it would still have to hear all the regulations.
Right. So my specific question then, or
Yep.
concern that I want to express, is that in all these secondary dwellings, they either have to be in the same ownership or a covenant use, restricted by covenant. We don't address in the application in many cases which that's going to be, which I think. Pardon?
There's a separate application for the covenant.
But it's
lot.
not included in the package, is what I'm saying.
Well, none of these are covenants because there would be another piece,
I
another
know,
special
but what I'm
covenant.
saying is it's helpful to know when I'm reviewing the
Oh, if
application,
one of
which
them's
it's
gonna
going
be?
to be. So it's simply a statement.
Oh, okay. I
in
see what
the-
you're saying.
In the
So-
materials would be helpful.
Okay.
The second issue is, in the case of same ownership, question that I have was getting a lot of these applications, and there have been a lot of discussion about rentals, especially rentals on a short-term basis. And the question is, in considering these applications, do we have the power to restrict in any way the use
So
in terms of rental?
I'm just going to say, we're back to policy level decision here at this point. I hear all your points.
I-
They're good
That's what I'm
points.
saying. It's the second thing I'd like to have discussed.
Yeah, okay, all right. And I hear that. And that's why I was hoping that what we can do is set up a meeting and get that information in before that instead of trying to
Okay.
hash it out.
That's
Yeah.
really all I was bringing
Okay.
up. That's what the question is.
Gotcha. So I think with that in mind, which ones do you, are there certain ones you want to isolate out here then? Do you want me to just go through these one by one? How would you like me to proceed, guys?
Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes, ma'am.
At the last meeting where you all discussed some policy changes, one of the things that was brought up about having these type of applications submitted to staff 2 weeks prior to the meeting. Currently, what it's been is 1 week before the
Right.
meeting. Again, then you do have this time crunch, if you will, of reviewing applications that are inconsistent. That's why it's very clear on the staff report why we need a revised site plan. I'll just give you the first one that you have in front of you right now. The change on this, everything's perfect except for they're not giving us the scalar separation between the two structures, which is a requirement. I could eyeball it and say, yeah, it meets, but I'm not gonna do that. So those are the very, very minor tweaks. I hate to hold up an applicant because of that type of thing. That would be something that we say, okay, we need a revised site plan, they'll get it to me tomorrow, where we can get those letters out there for these people
Yeah.
to move forward.
Yeah.
That's what we've done,
See what you're saying.
just to give you an idea on that. It's not, if this was, something that actually wouldn't be able to be rectified, obviously staff wouldn't do a project right now.
So do you think that?
Can you direct the question up this way so we can all hear it? Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. So my wonder is, do we think that with a extended period for the review process to go forward, that some of these things would be found and addressed before it gets into the packet?
Holly just said that, yes.
Yes. For instance, this past week, we had how many days? So it's, yes.
It's the holiday.
Timeframe is going, I think it's going to be a lot better.
Yep. All right.
Mr. Chairman, just
Yes, ma'am.
one more thing to add to Fritz's question. The sole reason why the planning board is reviewing second dwellings is that the planning board shall make a determination regarding the adequacy of access to the lot and structures. That's the limit of your review on these.
Okay.
Yeah, all the more reason I think for us to have an offline discussion on this, because it sounds like there's a few things we need to discuss and maybe just clarify as well too. All right, so I'm just gonna take these one by one, because I'm feeling like I don't have a good sense of direction at this point. So Marina J. Sutra on 21 Vestal Street. Pleasure of the board on this application, unless there's any discussion.
Move endorsement.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion on the issue? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Abstain.
You're gonna abstain, 4-0. Okay, got it. Shane Perry, 3 Hussey Farm Road. Is there any questions or discussion you want to have on this one?
Where are we?
What would you all
Yeah,
like to do with this one?
Holly, thank you. Holly.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to race ahead. Slow me down if I'm doing that.
Move to endorse.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion on this? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Abstain.
All right, 4-0, thank you. On Anthony Costa, 10 Swift Rock Road. If you need a minute to review it. Is there any questions or anything you want to ask about this one? Hearing none, what would you like to do with this application?
Funny room there.
You want to just pass on it?
Just one more minute.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, there you go. That's what you need to say to me. I'm sorry, son. I'm being maybe a little fast. So thank you. I'm so sorry. I apologize.
Move approval.
All right, so move approval.
Second.
Do you still need time?
No.
Okay.
Second.
All right, yeah, no, because I want to, like I said, slow me down. All right, so it's motion's made second for approval, discussion, hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Douglas A. and Denise Schenkel on 2 Old Tom Nevers Road. I'll give you a few moments to review that again.
Just one of those small lots, Andrew, with the limit thing that was put in town there was that LUG 3 over the 1 acre, where it is, the 1500 thing. Yeah.
Do you need more time, or are you all good? If you're all good, then is there
Move
any
to
discussion?
endorse.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Abstain.
Okay, thank you. Timothy Whiteley. This is 3 White Hart Lane.
I have a question for
Yes, ma'am.
Holly, if I can.
Please.
Holly, there's a number of these that show pools on their maps, their plats, and I know there's a special permit requirement for pools that goes to the ZBA, right? Not to us. I just, what I was thinking was we have cut weed back again, and there had been an issue about a swimming pool out there, and I just wonder, when you review them, do you advise people and say, remember, you have to run this by the ZBA, or is that?
MMD.
This one in particular, I did not say anything about the pool, because again, you're looking at it for adequate access.
Okay, I see.
That would be up to them to make sure they apply. the
MMD though,
appropriate
different.
permits for the building department.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
this property is an LUG2 only. The Village Residential District requires a special permit for pools.
Okay.
Thank you, Leslie.
Yeah. So do you want more time on this? If not, what would you like to do with the
I'll
application?
make move approval.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. As we said, Catherine O'Brien Senior's continued. Brings us to Scott W. Anderson, Hillary Anderson, and 282 Nantucket.
Okay.
You guys good? Discussion on it? Not really hearing anything.
No.
Yep.
What would y'all like to do?
Move approval.
All right, do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Abstain.
Got it. Okay, Constantine and Haley Gillis, we're gonna come back to that when we get through our public hearing with that. That brings us to 281 Pumic Pond NT,
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
and you're gonna recuse from
Well,
that.
I was going to. I do not have, I had a past history, and I just wanted to explain. I have no affiliation or financial interest, so in light of Ms. Wagner's new position to abstain, I think it's fair to the applicant if I don't sit and they get it denied for that particular reason. I just would like to be noted that I would like to vote on this.
Duly noted, sir. Thank you.
I have
Please, no, this is
Question?
what we're here for.
the question that I have, it's a simple one, and is there significance to the fact that the house that was, it's being moved back, I think, maybe redone, is why it's called a secondary dwelling and the small dwelling is called the primary dwelling?
Gotta be getting shifted, or it might be a mistake.
Andrew or Leslie? I'm gonna
I
turn
mean,
to
to
you.
have a 4,000 square foot secondary dwelling and a,
Yeah, in actuality, the new building becomes the primary and the existing building becomes the secondary. They're defined by number of bedrooms. So the building with the most bedrooms is the primary as opposed to the secondary, and it's not the sequence that they're built.
I understand that, so why would the I would presume that the 4,200 square foot dwelling is the one with the most bedrooms. Why are they referring to it as the secondary dwelling?
I think because they're thinking sequence, not by law.
But it has no significance other than that.
No, it's incorrect. It really that's the proposed primary dwelling. Relocated dwelling becomes by law, by the definition, the secondary.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else, board members? All right, what would you like to do with this
Move approval.
application? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Say unanimously. That brings us to Virginia's Costanova, 7 Trotters Lane. I'll give you a few moments for that. Is there anything you want to discuss on this? When you're ready, I'll certainly, if you're ready to rock and roll here, I'll certainly take a motion from the board for some action.
Move to approve.
All right, and do I hear a second?
Second.
And if we're going too fast again, just
Nope.
slow us down. Motion's made and seconded, discussion, hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed,
Abstain.
duly noted. Okay, Teddy Boomer LLC, 94 Tom Nevers Road. Give you a few minutes with that one.
Move approval.
All right, and do I hear a second?
Second.
Unless someone wanted to discuss something?
140,000 square
There you
feet.
go. So the motion's made and seconded, discussion, hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously, thank you. Okay, previous plans. So 3103, which is Lauren Brock, is just a request to reaffirm the vote that was done. This is a request to rescind the second curb cut. Unless you have any questions,
Yeah,
make a motion to
I'll make a motion to reaffirm the vote.
Second.
discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. And on Sandpiper 1, same process again.
Make a motion to reaffirm.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. That brings us to secondary dwelling on 5 Hedgebury Lane. This is a modification. Do you have any questions on this?
This is just a site plan, right? Holly?
Yes, I went and inspected for the secondary dwelling, and it was not in substantial compliance with the approval.
Yes.
This is what the board approved, with parking spaces up here. And the as-built stopped him right here, so there wasn't sufficient parking. Photos included, report included. And this is your revised plan, they will have to extend here, we get stacking on the property as well as to.
No, Judith, the reason I asked her to do that is because just this is some of the review that goes on that we don't see that they're doing. And I'm just saying, there's so much stuff.
I understand.
And
I'm
it's
just
not-
trying to do my
Yeah,
responsibilities.
and I totally understand that because we've already had this, and Barry will bring that up when we have our next meeting about this. That we've had this discussion with previously with some of the stuff with the as-built and the engineered stamp plans and all that kind of stuff. But it's good that that came up tonight so that you could see that that they're checking the original.
I appreciate it a lot, and
Yeah.
all I would say is if there's any way we can help give them a stronger hand to get people to comply. I hear what you said, John, about cost and people not wanting to spend if there's some kind of doubt, but it's just, you got to balance all that.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question, if I might, on this. This is 3 sets of stacked parking, which of course everybody knows how much I love stacked parking.
All right, this, you got to realize, this is for the,
But
this is
what
for,
I'm asking.
yeah, if you can just, but you realize this is before the board. Okay,
Okay.
thank you. But go ahead, finish what you want to say, I'm just
That's
saying.
all right.
All right, thank you. Discussion on this?
No.
Anyone else?
Did we make a motion? Did somebody make a motion?
Not yet.
I don't think so. Okay.
Yep.
So I'll make a motion to approve the revised site plan for staff recommendation.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Okay, second dwelling on 13 Waydale Road.
For the record, Mr. Chairman, I'll recuse.
Thank you, sir. Duly noted. And you have a letter that was basically handed back out just a short time ago here. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it, or Holly, you want to do a synopsis, or? I'll give you a few minutes to catch up on this.
May I introduce it?
Yeah.
Let me just give them do you mind if I give them a moment to read through it? Because we kind of got this real quickly. If
Certainly.
that's okay, thanks, I really appreciate it.
Just the first page, Holly.
You want that?
No, the top. No, there's one more. There's one more. There you go.
guys are good.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm ready for Steve to explain. It's fine.
Definitely ready for your explanation.
There we go.
Fine.
Okay,
Great,
thanks for giving them the minute. I thought
No,
that was
that's
important.
fine. I misunderstood. Good evening. For the record, Stephen Welch, owner applicant, 13 Waydale Road. If I may, so I reviewed the staff report yesterday afternoon and saw there was some confusion. And to address that, I emailed a revised proposal, a copy of which was presented to you earlier today via email and then hard copy at the table. So the exhibit on the screen is actually that black line with a couple of minor corrections I'd just like to point out before starting and answering any questions. The corrections are, the corrections are under 1B. Within the Exhibit A, secondary lot approval for the access is 19 feet width at the driveway intersection at the apron. And in the narrative, I had inadvertently indicated 18 feet. In addition, there was a reference at the top of the letter that's crossed out to a section of the code that is not actually relevant. And I corrected by adding per code of the town of Nantucket at the top and also at the bottom, and corrected a little bit of grammar. So with that being said, I'd like to please enter that into the record for the review and vote. Do you want me to go through the application or?
I think that would be best.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So what is before me is a secondary dwelling on an oversized lot. It's 12,568 square feet in a 10,000 square foot zone, the R10 zone. When the secondary lot is created, the lot will be in conformance with your previous approval in the code. Holly, would you mind flipping to the site plan, Exhibit A3? Okay, so that's the site plan. So what this is a secondary dwelling application for modification. What is proposed, the secondary dwelling was previously approved at a larger size, approximately 760 to 890 square feet, depending on the read. The location on the lot is not changed. It'll be the, as labeled, future secondary dwelling to the right. There are, the location of the lot is not changed. It remains within the existing structure. No variances or waivers are requested. Under number 1 and 2 of the letter, proposed text, ask for approval to use the existing access and parking, and ask that upon implementation of the secondary lot under the Nantucket Housing Needs Covenant Ownership Form, that the access and parking shall be as shown in Exhibit A3, which you recently approved under a secondary lot approval. Under number 3 of the letter, I've offered a restriction for a limitation of 3 bedrooms in the secondary dwelling. That's not a requirement, it's just something I'm putting in. Number 4 addresses required minimum parking spaces. 2 are required where at least 3 are provided currently. Number 5 provides for the commonly used requirement to contain the height of plant material for safety at the driveway access, which I believe is 3 feet, no taller than 3 feet. Number 6 addresses the standard requiring for an as-built prior to a certificate of occupancy. And as proposed, the language tracks and affirms the previous special permits and secondary dwelling approvals. If you have any questions, happy to address. And either way, I'd ask that you would approve as submitted tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, any discussion?
Move approval?
All right. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. 616, which is Anderson Grennan, who's the manager of Nantucket Tents. This request for a driveway modification. Good work. Do you have any questions that you need to ask, or anything you want to discuss as a group here?
I'd ask,
Yes, ma'am.
Holly, do you think we should have a motion about minor modification?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that definitely, when staff puts that in there,
Yep.
that's almost a,
So, move approval with the staff recommendations.
Second.
so, yeah, okay, so
Is
let
that-
me just do, I
okay.
really want to break it apart, because
All right,
you
sure.
brought up a really good point, so I just asked that the
Yeah.
board make a determination this is a minor modification.
Okay,
Right, so I'll make that motion that we determine that it's minor.
Okay, and second to that?
second.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Discussion on it, hearing none, all those in favor, please say
Aye.
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 Those opposed, perfectly ready to go now.
And do you want the second half of that, and that we find that the minor modification requires no public hearing, has no effect on intent
No,
findings of
just,
relief?
just by virtue of the fact
Okay.
that you made a minor modification, brought all that into
Okay,
play.
good.
That's really why I tried to keep it separate.
Sounds
So what would
good.
you like, what would you like to
Move
do?
approval of the letter?
There you go.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Beautiful. Thank you all. 4218 United Parcel Service Incorporated.
I move to endorse.
All right, do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion on the issue? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
if I may, the applicant or the applicant's representative is actually asking if the board this evening appoint to sign the plans so they can actually move forward with their proposal. I know it's a little unorthodox, but that is what they were requesting.
All right.
Do you want us to pass it?
That's up to the chair.
You know what, can we,
Okay, we'll
you're just
do
gonna
it.
promise me in the end that you're gonna make sure that gets done? Yeah. So that brings us to a number of things, which is Phillips Run Road Cluster Subdivision. They're
years
looking
ago.
for ultimately a request for an extension.
Move to approve the extension?
Okay, do I
Great.
hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. All right, I always screw this up, and I'm so sorry. One of these days, I will actually get it right. Nanahamucky Preserve subdivision, and I apologize up front.
That sounded excellent to me. Do you have a second
I've been-
choice
I've been-
pronunciation?
I've tried my best, and I've been
The E
scolded
is
on
silent.
multiple
The E is
times.
silent, I think.
All right, so I'm sorry.
If,
Discussion on the
if
issue, you
it's
guys all good?
appropriate, move to request that enforcement action be taken consistent with the documentation included in our packet.
No. Okay, and do I hear a second to that?
Second.
Second.
All right, discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously.
Could I
Yes, ma'am.
just add one other thing? I see
Please.
Mr. Collier's here, and I would just say thank you to the Land Council for tracking those things and keeping us aware if there's violations, because we can't be out there in the mud and find out where everything is off
We've-
kilter, but thank you.
Kind of close things, I'm sorry. You
Okay,
probably
sorry.
should've shut.
That's okay, I didn't hear what you said on that.
I'm
Okay,
so sorry. Yeah, do me a favor too, if you can't hear me, yep, please, guys,
Sorry.
yell at me.
Yes, no,
Yeah, thank you. See, I'll raise my voice. That's all I need to hear from you sometimes, so I apologize. Thank you.
that's okay. Barry, it's Jeff Kashuli, just
Right.
the long and short of it, we're on it, and we'll be back shortly with a wrap-up on this. So,
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. All right, so 7133, which is the Gingy Lane subdivision. This is a complaint from a neighbor.
Move that we ask for there to be action taken by way of enforcement based on the materials in the file
Okay.
and Mr. Pesci's report.
So board members, they're having a real problem out there. So,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're going to have to project.
Sorry, move that on number 7133, that based on the material in the file and the report from Mr. Pesci, we ask that enforcement action be taken to assure compliance with the permit requirements.
All right. Do I hear a second to that?
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. The other thing too is if you can't really hear real well in back, there are seats up front too. So don't be shy. Don't be shy. Thank you. And that brings us to 7823, which is the White Hart Lane subdivision. It's a release for an escrow.
Make a motion to release the escrow of the remaining funds for that.
Okay, do I hear a second to that?
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Thank you. Okay, that's going to bring us to the public hearing phase of things. There are several that are continued to November 15th. 7716, which is the Valero Road subdivision, 66-18, which is 8 Marble Way, 35-18, which is Act Bowling, and 48-18, which is Mass Metaspa Incorporated. That brings us to 8277, which is the Clay Street subdivision modification.
Mr. Chair, it has to be
Yes, sir.
recused as a direct. I
I
have one of my
also-
clients as a direct abutter.
Duly noted.
And also will recuse, which I've done in the past.
Right. I think, Andrew, if memory serves me correct, this was rule of special necessity that was invoked for
Yeah.
this one.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I just want to be
Yep.
clear at that. Yeah, so I got it. You don't have to restate it, though. Thank you. There's really been no additional information provided, and I'm going to recheck with Holly and Leslie, Andrew. Just there's nothing else that we have.
Mr. Chairman, I did receive a notification from Mr. Kyberg and Ms. Alger. I believe they've worked out something, or we're pretty close. There's still some additional information that we needed to get you all, but maybe we could get an update from them.
Sure, please. I'm sorry.
Thank you. We have been having some discussions, and there's really, well, in my view, there are two items going on. One is what you all are doing, and the other is this complicated agreement with Richmond that goes to the rear access for a hypothetical agricultural use. Speaking of the first, I would say that you have accomplished a couple of your goals insofar as we agree that Clay Street will not be used for any commercial uses, and the second one is escaping me at the moment.
And you're going to have to speak up a bit because the sound system in here is not
Okay.
where it
So
should be tonight.
we agree with the first thrust of the
Got it.
planning board that Clay Street will not be used for commercial purposes. If someday we do re-pull an ag permit for the lot, we would have to gate off Clay Street if there are any commercial uses happening on, what are we calling this lot now, 42 or 44 Clay Street? For the lot, that's the subject of this hearing. That if there were an ag permit pulled, Clay Street would be gated off so that obviously so that our neighbors could use it, but that anybody who might go onto our property for commercial use would not be able to use it. The other items I would suggest are perhaps outside the purview of the board insofar as I can't propose a plan at this moment for an agricultural use because we don't have one yet. We seem to be a long way from reaching an agreement with Richmond, who has, been responding to us and giving us revised agreements, but we're not there yet. And I ask for specificity from them and for responses, and like I said, they are always, good guys and gals, and they work with us, but very, very, very slow. And I think that my sister would attest to that. And so some of those items relating to the rear access, again, I would suggest don't really go to the thrust of what we're doing here, which was the use of Clay Street. We don't have an agricultural permit anymore for that lot at the moment. Like I said, someday when we clear this matter up with Richmond and we reach an agreement with our neighbors as to screening and so forth on a proposed plan, then maybe we'll ask that agricultural permit be put back in place. But for the moment, we don't have it. We agree to gating off Clay Street if there were a commercial use and not using Clay Street for any commercial use. And so I had that discussion with my sister, and it was both of our opinions that perhaps it would be time for the planning board to make a motion or have a proposed decision that maybe we can comment on and move it along.
Great. Ms. Alger, do you have something you want to? Please.
add to that. I think having a decision that I think maybe Peter and I could draft and work on between now and the November meeting
Perfect.
would be a good idea. The only thing I would add is that there was significant cutting on my client's property in connection with the roadway improvements. And I think the restoration of that cutting area should be part of the board's decision because it's, I think, tied to the construction of the road. And I guess the other piece that I thought Peter was going to mention is that the improvements are supposed to be done by December, and I don't believe they're going to be. So there probably should be some sort of extension built in, but we're going to want that to be fairly short because we'd like to see the construction of this road completed. So would he.
Thank you, Brad.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
But I think that request has to come in separately. I don't think can it be done as part of this decision?
I mean, I think the board would prefer it, but let me ask Andrew and Leslie.
Right, it can be worked, I think that would be a good topic to work into your joint decision together.
Okay.
It can be a separate matter, but the public notice clearly talked about road construction, so
Okay.
just to keep it maybe in one place, that might make sense.
That would be fine.
Great, thank you. This is a public hearing, ladies and gentlemen, so if anyone would like to comment on this. Board members, do you have anything you want to chime in on?
I would just say I appreciate Ms. Alger for many reasons, including her deft hand last night, but I could not quite see how we'd come up with some proposal ourselves without an agreement being developed by the two of you. So I'm glad you both have reached that decision because I think it'll be more efficient and appropriate.
Good. Agreed. All right, so
we're gonna continue, right?
we're going to continue at this point unless there's anything else you want to discuss.
No?
Do we need a motion?
have
Yes,
a-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, do they need an extension or do they have enough time, date?
No, they're good.
good?
Their action
Okay.
deadline is set to 12. Hold on.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Did I take that back?
November?
Holly, Catherine, do you guys know whether you need an extension or not? I know you'll probably want to do one, just if there isn't.
It's a board initiative, and we just re-advertised
Okay.
it because we had
Okay.
run out of
All right,
time
good.
before, so the new action deadline flows from this meeting, so.
Okay, all right, great. So
Thank
I'll
you.
make, so
right.
Judith, I'll second your,
Move to extend the public hearing. Is that where we're at?
We're good.
Until,
Motion to
move to continue the public hearing until
November
November the 15th.
yeah, second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Great, thank you all. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Is that mic on? Do you know?
The mic's on.
Over there?
That one, I don't know about, but I know our mics are active, and quite frankly, we're not getting good volume. Thank you. Thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah, I know, because I can usually hear something in the auditorium when they're on. All right, so, like I said, please just make sure you speak up, board members. This brings us to 8213, which is the Old South Road Limited Partnership on 31 Old South Road. You're recusing. Thank you, Mr. Lowell. Okay. Mr. Malloy, good evening.
Good evening, Dan Malloy, Site Design Engineering for the applicant. I believe this project was filed with you several months ago. I don't think you've really had a full-on public hearing discussion on this one yet. So we just filed these draft plans, I think about a week ago. So I'd like to just present this to you tonight, go through the details of the project, see what comments, concerns there are, and then we'll come back in November with revisions and try to get this one wrapped up if that's the direction it goes in. So what we're looking at here, I'll start right from the beginning. Looking at a property about 28,000 square feet right on Old South Road. It's RC2 zoning. We're looking to subdivide it into 4 lots with one big lot, just over 8,000 square feet, right on Old South Road, and then 3 smaller lots as you go back down the road. The road is on the top of the screen going left to right, so you got the lots on the bottom. We are looking to restrict these lots in terms of their uses. I think that may have been a question at one point in time on the property. We're looking on the front lot, the larger lot on Old South Road, to do a mixed use, commercial, residential, some type of mixture on that. The back 3 lots, we're looking to do residential uses only. So I know that's a concern in terms of what we're going to do out here. So we're trying to keep this somewhat in a low impact setting. I know it's RC2, but obviously we're not pursuing all of the RC2 uses. The road would come off of Old South Road, but looking at about a 16-foot road. The first section of the road adjacent to what would be the first lot, it's intended to be a gravel or shell road, but we have every intention of putting, at a minimum, a apron off of Old South Road, and that apron may extend the full length of the first lot, depending on what is built on that lot for a commercial use. So you'd have some type of a paved apron extending into the property, and then transitioning into a gravel road for the residential uses in the back. In terms of the rest of the development, it is in the sewer district. There's a sewer line already on the property would connect to. We are in the wellhead protection district, so we will have to go to Wanacoma to get a certificate of water quality compliance from them as well. There's no environmental issues out here. There's no wetlands, no endangered species. So 90% of this project will be right here with the planning board. We're not going to Conservation Commission or anybody else for permitting on this. That's the project in a nutshell, just to throw it out there, see what comments you have so we can get this thing back on track.
Sure. Board members? Yeah, please.
I don't know if this was the original or still current, but there's a list of requests for waivers. Could you comment about that?
There was a very long list of waivers that was filed initially. I expect that list after tonight to be shorter. The general waivers here will be a waiver on the reduction in the right-of-way width from 40 feet down to something probably along the lines of 20 feet. They'll be looking for a 16-foot road versus a 20-foot road. These are waivers that are fairly consistent with other projects the board has reviewed. I believe there were waiver requests in there to do with topography and stormwater. Those waivers will be taken out. Those won't be requested. There may be some other smaller ones to do with a bike path or something to that effect, but I think a lot of what you saw in that list will go away.
Would you mind my asking about the road width? I think Amelia Road always comes to mind about a road that's too narrow and with parking or trying to get through. So I'm always a little uneasy when I see requests for waivers of road width. Is there a particular reason you feel you need that?
Well, in this case here, the uses we're looking at, so the first lot would be a commercial, residential, commercial mixed use. So that would be, if there's an intensity on the site, that's where it would be. So you would bring in a paved road, at least to access the first lot, and we'd like to go gravel in the back. The reason for 16 feet, we feel it's adequate based on the uses that are going to be there. This isn't, Amelia Road, yes, has traffic parking problems. This isn't anywhere near that intensity of a development in terms of what's being proposed.
And maybe just to follow through on that point, I think Amelia Road, as I remember way back, it wasn't at its current intensity back in the day when they opened it up, right? Do you foresee any possible intensification of uses here in terms of other connections or further development in the area here?
Well, in terms of the uses on these lots, we intend to restrict them so they can't be intensities of development. If there are other people that want to access this road or come into it, that a lot of times the board puts a condition on these types of projects that if an abutter wants to access this road, we have to come back to you as a board to make sure that the infrastructure can handle whatever they're proposing. So based on what we want to do, we're comfortable with what the road width is, but if there's a change that it should increase that demand, then I think we'd have to come back to you to say the road is still adequate or it's not, we want to go wider.
Okay, but you don't foresee anything as far as you're aware now?
Not for us, no, I don't.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else on the board want to ask questions? So, real quickly, Dan, so the rear lots that you're going to do residential at this point, what are you proposing? Primary, secondary, tertiary?
More than likely looking at a duplex scenario.
Duplex?
The very last lot, we may have a primary and a secondary. We haven't finished the configuration of that yet.
Yep.
But I don't expect you're going to see primaries and secondaries in all these lots. They're not that big for what we're trying to do here. We'll come back and answer that question at the next meeting, but I don't expect there's going to be a lot of secondaries.
All right, and that also kind of leads me toward what are we looking at on the front lot for commercial, because that always poses a question about parking and how it's going to affect the status of what's behind you. And
Right, so we have some thoughts on what a layout would look like, but in terms of an actual specific use, that's unknown. But I think we could certainly go through some of the allowed uses and cut those right off in terms of what isn't going to go there.
Perfect.
There's a lot of things in RC2 district that are allowed, which just from physical location would never happen. We can certainly narrow that list down even further.
Yeah, I mean, because, as we're talking here, I mean, the difference between, let's say, like a restaurant versus an office, generates all different types of scenarios with
Right.
this. So as we've done with other things of this nature, at least beginning to trim that list down.
I think we can trim that list down, and we could even put conditions in there of certain types of uses would require a revisit to the board, potentially to say this road is inadequate for that type of use.
Perfect.
So make it bigger. So I think that's a discussion. We can certainly get you those answers when we come back.
Great. Do you have anything from staff perspective? Yes, ma'am.
At the prior prior planning board meeting, have town meeting on the brain, we talked about the owner's cooperation with a future rezoning, maybe something to the effect of R5 in the back and maybe commercial neighborhood in the front. So that's something that we would like for you to consider. And it seems consistent with what you're proposing.
Good point. Yes, sir.
Dan, it looks like, is the edge of pavement accurately shown? It looks like there's a fairly wide shoulder there, is that right?
No, what you're seeing there is strictly property lines and easements.
Do I see that far line, or is that just the edge of the paper, I guess?
Not sure if I can tell on that plan. That's, hold on. There is a large gap between the property and Old South
Okay.
Road, the physical edge of pavement itself. Let's see if that's the actual one.
I think you're aware that there were a number of road
Yes,
improvements.
That is the edge of pavement.
It is, okay. Including construction of sidewalks, and, I would hope that the board would consider because there's sidewalk and bike path waivers that are probably not necessary in the interior road, but that should be constructed in accordance with the town plan along the frontage of this, which, I would think would be tied at least to
Is that on our side or the other side?
sidewalks on your side, the existing bike paths on the other side.
Right. I
So-
mean, I think we could certainly participate in that. If possible, it would be better, I think, if we contributed versus build,
Well,
depending on when the timing, everything else happens.
Okay. I mean, I think at least along your particular frontage, obviously not beyond that.
Right, I think we can certainly make that work. It's only a question of determining what that is and where.
Timing.
When. Timing is the bigger issue. I don't necessarily want to construct a sidewalk 100 feet long that ends nowhere on both sides.
Yeah, I think that, I agree with Andrew, though. I think that's a discussion that I want you to have with staff, that, if it's a sidewalk, so be it, or some type of contribution into the roadway system as
Yeah,
well, too.
we can work that out.
To try to make some sense out of what will work best for public benefit.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? No. Yes, ma'am.
I'll try not to say anything, but
Oh,
I'm
please.
just sort of wondering whether, because the initial lot is a commercial residential lot, whether that area shouldn't be 20 feet, and then you narrow to the 16 for the back more residential lots. I'm just thinking traffic coming and going from a commercial establishment, you'll need turning radius for people coming in and going out. Just a thought.
Yeah, that is something we're looking at. That's what we're trying. We need to narrow down the uses in our end so we can make that determination. If that's necessary, that's definitely something we'll come back with.
Yes, sir.
And Dan, can you, the land on the, I guess, is at the north, what's happening on that property?
The north side, we are going to be trying to reach out to the abutters on that side to see if they have any interest. As of right now, we don't know if they have interest in accessing from their side of the road. It's an abutting property.
Is that an oversized property?
It's an oversized property similar to ours with subdivision potential. So we are trying to reach out to them just for this exact reason. I thought that would come up so we can determine if we need to come back and say they are part of this or they aren't, or they are interested.
Thank you.
Anything else from the board? Staff? It's a public hearing, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Collier, good evening. Yeah, you're just going to have to...
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Cormac Collier, representing Nantucket Land Council. I have a number of individual comments directed to the development itself, but more so I think it's important for the planning board to take a step back and look at the development, what's proposed before you, from more of a holistic sense. I have mentioned these comments before, more so in the beginning of my tenure, not necessarily in the middle. Now that there's a certain type of tenor in the community that we've all heard quite constantly in terms of concerns of development, and whether the planning board has any ability to curtail it if the zoning is what it is, whether the planning board has the ability to curtail it or not. I think the planning board has the ability to curtail, control, regulate development through its regulations. And you have a development here before you that is asking for a reduction in layout by a half, 40 feet to 20 feet. If they did a 40-foot layout, it would be a 3-lot subdivision, not a 4-lot subdivision. So stepping back, knowing that the community is very concerned about development, and you have the ability to enforce your regulations and reduce the amount of development that would be consistent if they did not ask for a waiver, I think it's something that you guys need to talk about. Yeah. That's my main point. And individually, I think, alluding to what Andrew got, went towards subdivision potential from a lot to the north. Not even a discussion, also, you should go a little bit beyond.
There's the volume. Wow.
No. We all still here.
It's
I'm scared of speaking.
It's trying to make up for the last time.
There you go. Looking at bedroom count is very important in terms of the duplexes and the proposed intensity on that road and the amount of cars that are utilizing the road, but not just utilizing the road, that are coming onto Old South Road, and how that fits into the traffic flow as well. So that would be, those are my main comments. But again, I think you do have a responsibility in terms of the community's desire, looking to the planning board to really look at how your regulations fit in with development potential. Thank you.
Thank you. And I agree with you at that point. That's why I'm asking them to look at getting back to us about what they want to do with those three. I'm not a fan of big roadways. For the sake, it just doesn't make sense to have a glaring roadway there. But if there's other things that we can be doing in lieu of that, that's why I want to see what the commercial's going to generate for it.
It's you, Cormac.
This magnetic.
It's magnetic personality.
There you go. Now it's the microphones up here 2 feet. They're so close to each other. He's got the volume on. But that's too why I'd like to see what's going to go on those back lots. I'd hate to do one thing and then have them say, but we can do primary, secondary, tertiary, and another. So I think that's another way to kind of control that in.
Yes. I definitely see where you're going with that, Mr. Chairman, and I don't think my comments would be taken in a box that you would just look at development impact alone, you would look at the proposed use. But they definitely go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And not just the proposed use, but look at the amount of development as it relates to this community discussion really going on right now in terms of development and growth. And again, the 40-foot layout is just a layout. You can have the road width look something more reasonable, but the layout would be the layout.
Yeah. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Catherine, I don't think it's the master volume. I think it's these. They may need to tweak each one of these. Yeah. Thank you. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. Is there anyone else in the audience who wants to comment on this? Public hearings. We're going to have more on this anyways. Any last minute thoughts from the board? If not, I'd ask for a motion to continue this.
Make that motion, Mr. Chair.
So motion to continue to 11:15. And do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Thank you. Okay, that's going to bring us to 3418, which is Act Natural Incorporated. We've not really received anything new at this point. I don't know if anyone's here for that. Hi, how are you, sir?
It's Mike from Mike Sullivan from Act Natural.
Hi.
Just to update, we have a completed application as of August 14th in front of Board of Selectmen, but we were asked to wait till after the special town meeting because obviously we had a big vote last night. So our application is now going to be heard. Hopefully soon. We told they're going to look at criteria and figure it out, and they'll get back to us. And as soon as we know, we'd like to get back in front of the board here and go from there. So
Okay.
we met with appropriate people, and the application's complete. We'll see how it goes from there.
All right. Great. Thank you. Is there anyone, I'm sorry, board members? I apologize. Anything from staff? Is there anyone in the public who'd like to comment on this? All right, so would you say November, December? Give me
We're
a.
hopeful for November.
All right, so we'll, if the board's so inclined, we'll put this onto our November 15th meeting as a continuance.
Yep.
Make a
So-
motion to continue to 11:15.
And second,
Second.
discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Thank you. 6518, Mid-Island Fuel and Auto Wash on 43 Sparks.
I have to recuse too, I think.
All right.
It's gonna be
Is there anyone here for this? It was continued. We've got no additional information. I don't see anyone's popping up to deal with this.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir?
I did speak to a representative, and at least in the current configuration, they are going to have to file an MCD, so there would be I'd ask that the board continue this, and then to find out, we may in fact get an MCD
Got it.
application.
Okay, great.
Sounds like you make. Oh,
Let me just check in, because it is a public hearing. I want to.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Cormac Collier, Nantucket Land Council. While I'm here, I just was going to ask through you to Andrew, because I also just saw what was presented. I'm obviously very interested in the water quality as it results from the car wash and whatnot. I assume they'll be giving you a lot of stormwater plans and making sure they're meeting state and local, right? And then working with Mark.
They need a
Because that was the application for the car wash. It wasn't just what they presented, correct?
right. Through you, Mr. Chairman. So they need a water quality certification. Because the property was originally not, I mean, the ownership has been joined together, which now brings it into the major commercial development, because now it's under the common control where before it was not. So there is, as you know, a higher standard of requirements, so.
Great, so we'll kick in through there.
Correct.
Thank
Yep.
you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Anytime, no problem. Thanks for bringing it up. Anyone else in the audience wishing to comment? So what would be appropriate is to continue this to our next meeting if you're so inclined.
Make a motion to continue to November 15th.
And do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have unanimously. That brings us to 7118, Norman M. Fidel and Susan Fidel and 3 Cudweed. This is an amendment. Is there anyone here? Hi, Mr. Santos, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. For the applicant, Norman and Susan Fidel, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors. Sarah Alger is also in attendance tonight, who was the attorney on this particular application. Just by way of background, this was a application for an addition to an existing dwelling, which required a special permit as we were working within the MMD zoning district. So the applicant was, a draft special permit was circulated. Then a final permit was issued, at which time, and delivered to the applicant, at which time there was an additional time restriction that was placed into the decision. This was a time restriction that was not discussed during any of the public hearings, and I believe was placed in the decision based on some older decisions that had time restrictions on them, not specifically pertinent to this site. While we understand that within the MMD, the board has the ability to restrict the time that work is done, I would say that this application did not have that time restriction discussed during the public hearing. And we're before you to ask that that time restriction be removed from the decision itself. And Holly, if you could refresh my memory, which number is it actually on?
Number 2.
So number 2, it says that all exterior construction shall be prohibited between March 1st and July 31st. Again, just a brief history. This is an addition to the structure itself. It's occurring within an area that's already developed, a lawn area. We feel the restriction is, again, not particularly pertinent to this particular application. I will say that, as I said, under the bylaw, you do have the right to restrict. In some of the past older MMD projects that were approved did have restrictions. I will say there are at least a few within the last 2 or 3 years that I personally worked on, at least 3 or 4, in which the restriction, there is no time restriction on them. And in certain cases, they were projects that we had, specifically in the Westmire Comet Road area, that did require review under the Mass Endangered Species Act, in which the state came back, did issue a no-take for the projects with some conditions. However, none of the other projects that we did have that were recently done had a time restriction on them. They did have restrictions with regard to the amount of clearing, the amount of symbolic fencing, and so forth, but nothing with specific time restrictions. So we'd we respectfully ask the board if we could have that time restriction removed from the decision.
Okay. Board members, any discussion?
I just have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
On why the March 1st to July 1st, to sort of imply some kind of a pollinating system that's happening or animal migration or something?
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Chairman, Paul and I talked about this in advance, and as he said, this wasn't discussed at the public hearing. This was carried forward from an older decision in a different part of the MMD, where it was brought up in their endangered species environmental work. And in that particular case, it had to do, I think, maybe with owls or some type of species that, isn't an issue on this particular site. So I completely support the change to remove that on this special permit.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks. You're welcome. Anything else, board members or from staff? Public hearing, ladies and gentlemen, anyone like to comment on this? Seeing no comment.
Move to close the public hearing.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. And the pleasure of the board.
Move to remove the prohibited construction dates provision that currently limits construction between March 1st and July 1st, so that there is no further prohibition.
Got it. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. That's going to bring us to 7218, which is Richard E. and Rhonda T. Van Ellen on 5 Chuck Hollow Road. Mr. Marklinger, good evening, sir.
Yes, sir. My name's Joe Marklinger. I'm representing the Donnellans, who are the applicants. Mr. Donnell sitting there. So what we have is a 68,000 square foot lot that we're applying to, on the covenant program, to have the front lot have about 21,000 square feet and the rear lot 48,000 square feet. The main question of some of the neighbors and also the staff was which lot is going to be designated the secondary or tertiary lot. We only have between 50 and 100 square feet of ground coverage left. We're allowed 2,000. We're somewhere around 1950. So
There's no other house.
we want to designate the big lot to get whatever square footage there is left. But under current zoning, we won't be able to get another building there.
Right.
That was one of the main concerns of the abutters. And actually, the only concern that I saw that was substantive, let's say. We're asking for a couple of waivers. I don't even know if we needed them under this, because it does, the percentage of ground coverage, I mean, it's existing, it's not going to change, but it's a little above the one lot would be a little above the 3%, because it's LUG 3. So we had some comments from the staff. Driveway apron, we happily put that in. The tertiary, the secondary tertiary, we went over that. I do have the parking spaces on there. They're a little too light. I can darken them up so that you can see them better. And we know we have to put that on record. And that's it. I mean, I guess I could have questions.
Board members? Do you have any questions at this stage?
I mean, I read the letters, and we haven't had one of these with opposition in a while.
Yep.
I know the sensitivity out here, but Joe, the LUG 3 over that, Andrew, can you just explain the 1,500 thing? Is this part of that?
If the lot's 40,000 square feet or over,
Yeah,
you get 2,000 square foot ground coverage.
right,
Which is what, they're somewhere around 1,900.
right, so this is
1,950.
almost, so you can't build.
You can't build a
When you
tertiary.
keep throwing the tertiary around, don't say tertiary, because there's not gonna be one.
Okay, a secondary.
Yeah.
No,
I'm
the
just saying.
reason I'm saying that
Yeah,
is we don't, I recommended that we don't give that up, because
zoning could change someday.
something could happen. It's
100 years
pretty
from now.
unlikely.
Yes, it is.
And, I don't see it happening, but
Happen. We haven't had this discussion where there's
Yep.
confusion with the word subdivision being used in letters. It's not a subdivision.
Right.
This is a slice of pizza out of a lot that is creating separate ownership for the smaller dwelling.
correct.
No more dwellings can happen here than could have happened if nothing happened.
Correct.
So, with that said, I just want that major part to be clear before we get into the
You're right. The only thing that changed is the ownership.
other part. The
Yeah.
ownership is the only thing. There's no more kitchens, no more nothing. They could probably put on like a teensy little addition or something with a little
Yeah,
bit.
a doorway or something like that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
just to make it clean so that when we start the public hearing, it's not, that stuff doesn't get brought up. 'Cause
Right,
That's
right.
this is not a subdivision.
Correct.
Okay. I read the 1969 Clark Coffin signature. I remember him very well, believe it or not. So there you go.
Anything else from the board? Yes, ma'am.
As I understand it, for a secondary lot to be created, it has to either be a family occupied or a covenant.
Correct. It's a covenant.
And are you going to put covenant restrictions on it.
We have to, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so, yes.
But I found your application somewhat
Not
global,
clear enough?
global or a little roundabout for me. It may have been
understand,
being
and I'm-
up late at the town meeting, but I
Right,
just
right.
wanted to be sure to ask and confirm
Right,
that.
right, that's, we're doing right, we're just gonna be a covenant lot. Yeah. Yeah, we'll put
Because
whatever
it's not,
restrictions
it's
in
not an option. It has to be there, right?
Correct, yeah,
Okay, so
yeah.
everybody understands that.
Right.
And I'm still a little confused about the idea about waivers. I don't quite see what the waivers, could you run that by me again, please?
Well, the percentage of ground cover in LUG 3 is 3%.
Right,
So by making these lots, I think it's the smaller lot will be 3.2 or 3.4 or something like that. So,
it says in the staff report, Lot 2 would be 3.6.
Okay,
And
3.6.
Lot 1 would be 2.4. And the
Right.
ordinance says that, let me see if I can read my writing here, the total ratio, putting those two parcels together is supposed to not exceed,
it's 2.8 now.
and with the changes, is it still
Yeah,
under
if it was
3?
still one lot, it'd be 2.8.
Okay.
But be that as it may, you're allowed the 2,000 square feet. And I'll let Leslie explain.
Okay, but I'm just wanting to be sure I understand what you're telling me before we hear more, that what is in the staff statement here is correct as far as you're
It is
concerned?
correct as far
Okay.
as I know.
Okay.
But I actually don't think we needed those waivers, but I thought we should.
Well, I would think if it's total of 2.8, you don't need a waiver, but maybe Leslie will enlighten us.
So there are instances, and this is one, where if the lot's treated as a single lot, the total ground cover ratio is within the normal parameter, so 3%. But then when you break up that same ground cover divided between two
It's not-
lots, it's
it's-
skewed.
Right.
So the bylaw allows for you to average the ground cover
Right.
over the two lots, but there's no extra ground cover allowed.
Right.
Does that make
So,
sense?
so his statement, just to help me with the bylaw, which I've read and written down, but I can't read my writing. Since it is still 2.8 if you put it together, then it's permissible or permissible with a waiver?
It's permissible with a waiver because it's being averaged.
Okay, that's just the whole
Yeah.
thing about are we dealing with waivers or not was a little confusing. Thank you.
And that's a common waiver that people ask for.
Anything else, board members?
I just have
Yes.
a quick thing based on the letters I was reading. I thought I was getting the impression that there was some level of fear or, yeah, something like that came across, that this is going to lead to some wholesale dividing of property. Did I read that wrong in their letters?
says it.
I thought I
That's
saw
why I said what I said at
several.
the beginning.
Yeah. But, so this does not start something new unless it's a new covenant property, I think, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because the concern is, again, the concern is the increased density, or not density, but growth, like we heard Cormac speak
There's-
to. So
well-
I just wanted to check on that instance for other property.
So before you go too far down that avenue, let me go to Leslie and Andrew, so. please.
So if this is something new, it may be something new to that area. I mean, I don't recall applications like this in that area of the island of Tom Nevers,
There's at
but
least
it's certainly
one that I
not
know.
new. And the intent of the secondary lot program is to allow someone to divide their lot that wouldn't otherwise be allowed to be divided, to create the secondary lot for covenant home ownership. And you don't get any density increases as a result of doing that. So there's no extra dwellings, no extra ground cover, no setback requirements. The intensity should be the same as if it was in single ownership.
Right, that's why I mentioned it would be covenant properties that this would be occurring on if it were to occur.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Just to follow up on that, and Leslie, in this area too, the number of bedrooms is also capped, correct?
would
Septic.
only be capped by their septic system.
That's a small lot.
So where does that trigger with the tertiary through you, Mr. Chairman?
The tertiary is when the number
Yeah.
of bedrooms comes
Yes,
in.
thank you.
But the number of bedrooms, even for tertiary, there's not a maximum in the LUG districts,
Okay.
only in the smaller districts.
Thank you.
Anything else, board members? Anything else from staff? So this is a public hearing, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, please, come on down. Good evening, Mr. Colletti.
Good evening, Robert Galletti. I live out on Nevers East. And so I'm a little confused. So on his covenant house, does he have enough land to do this, or he doesn't have enough land to do this?
We do have enough land.
So why is he here?
Because you have to have a special permit to do it. You can't just do it.
So legally he can do that?
If it's,
Oh, so then,
falls
well, if he has enough land, I have really no opposition. I mean,
It's,
I just feel it's not like really, we have 215 houses out there. If everybody builds a covenant house, if they have, is there a size for the covenant house?
it's, a s-
Okay, I'm gonna-
yeah.
let me
Go
go
ahead.
to Andrew.
That's why I said what I said at the beginning, just to kind of get that.
So there's nothing specific to covenant houses. The two dwellings on the property have to have the same relationship as the primary dwelling and secondary dwelling. They're just divided into different ownership through the secondary lot program, which requires a special permit, which is why they have to apply to the planning board.
So those three dwellings, he's in the low area there. Now, how is all the septic gonna work with three dwellings in a low area? 1.6 acres with three houses.
there's only two dwellings.
Well, you're proposing a third.
No,
No.
we're saying we can't build a third
No.
because we're already maxed out. We
No.
can't get a building permit
Just
for another dwelling. We
So
could,
you can't do a covenant house?
no, the covenant house is the cottage.
Oh, the covenant house is the cottage?
Correct. That's it.
Yeah.
And
Oh, I
it
see.
has
So
an
you're just
exist-
dividing, so he's having his cottage and the main house, that's it?
That's
The other
it.
third
No-
dwelling.
From
no
a
more houses.
helicopter, there's no
So it's
difference.
staying just like it is, he's just
Correct.
dividing it into two lots?
Two ownerships, two
Two
lots.
ownerships.
Correct.
It's
Yeah,
not,
we can't get another
Oh.
another
All
house.
right, oh,
We're not
I
applying for another house.
Totally misunderstood.
Yeah.
I thought he was gonna build another building.
no.
Nope.
Uh-huh. All
No.
right.
And the existing
Well, if it's
septic's
all right with
adequate.
the board, I guess it's all right with me. I totally misunderstood.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, don't
It's
be.
totally
don't-
fine, Bob. It's complicated.
It's very complicated.
It's simple and complicated.
We're glad you asked it, and glad you're paying attention.
No, and you said, you know, a subdivision. When I wrote my letter, I said, I live in the subdivision.
No.
You know,
What I meant was the word subdivision, when the covenant program started, the word subdivision got used, and it's not applicable to this. It is not a subdivision, it's a separation of ownership of an existing or to be built second dwelling that would have already been allowed to be built, but under the same lot ownership. This allows that second dwelling to sort of separate, but doesn't create more ground cover. It's just owning it.
right.
And they're restricted on, you know, it's a
So
big,
when he sells his back house, that'll be one owner.
yes,
And then, you know, it's on the market. So
Yeah.
the other one will be another owner.
correct.
So you don't think you're opening up a can of worms for
No.
everybody out there with two dwellings?
When they need to, it's providing year-round restricted housing,
Well, I realize.
and it doesn't add a dwelling. It's doing it through,
Adding a dwelling, yeah.
it's, there's, how many are in Tom Nevers? I know there's one in the middle.
215 houses right now.
No, I meant the covenant. I know there's one in a crazy 160,000 square
Mary
foot lot.
Castle has one.
I couldn't believe it.
Crestwood.
Yes, that's the one I'm thinking of. I was like, what are you doing this for? But,
It's a gigantic lot.
they're huge. Couldn't believe it. But anyway,
Does that help clarify it?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No,
it's okay, Bob.
no,
All
there's
good.
no apology necessary here.
Thank you for coming, by the
it's-
way.
It's better to clear. That's okay. No. Come on up and identify yourself.
I'm Jason Leonardo Finger. I actually live at 10 Chuck Hollow, which is kind of where the sea is. My mother wrote you a letter Melody Leonardo. She
Yep.
owns Tenchuck Hollow, and my husband and I are year-round tenants in the house. I guess one of my questions is, can you clarify where the parking will be for both sites, both
Mr. Markinger?
buildings?
What we've designated is, yeah, kind of, whoop, to your right a little, who's got this?
Holly does.
Oh, yeah, right there. So I
Is
got
that the
parking
current
easement there,
parking?
sort of to
Is
the
that
side of
current
where.
one?
Huh?
Is that the current parking for that?
No,
front
I
lot?
think the current parking is that little thing to the left of that. It's
So
as far as I.
is it visible from the street? Like, will the planting still be there? I mean,
Yeah, nothing's gonna change. I mean, little is possible.
And where is the park, and then the parking?
The parking for the back one is behind the house, where there's two
Says parking.
parking things, and there's, you know, it's insufficient.
And I think part of the confusion that we've had about this is, I think the first thing that got sent out to us by the town didn't say anything about a covenant house. I don't remember the word covenant, because that would have clued me into trying to talk to my mom about what was going on. So just, I didn't realize it till I picked up
That's okay.
this. But can you just, I think part of the other issue that maybe, I'm not sure if Glenn said this, but that some of the other people were thinking too beyond this is that we did, when my parents bought their land in the early 80s, there was that no subdividing. So even though this is a covenant house, that still kind of sends that same message. Apparently it died in 1990, and none of the homeowners, I don't know, were aware that it had died. So when they purchased their lot starting in 1969 and 1970, they thought they were purchasing as is. So I think that a lot of them would have tried to extend that if they had been aware of that, because I think that's just the fear. I know it's a covenant house, it's not technically subdividing, but it's starting, that's the precedence that everyone is afraid of.
So Andrew looked like he had something he wanted to comment on for a minute, if you don't mind.
Mr. Chairman, private deed restrictions are enforceable for a period of 30 years, and they do have to be extended prior to them basically expiring. So this is a situation, this particular subdivision was laid out before zoning was even adopted. So again, that's not something that we would be necessarily enforcing. It's something that has to be done privately.
And what about, I'm sorry.
No, please, go.
So, I guess I'll start with an easier question. How many septic systems are on this site? And is there currently two existing?
No, there's one septic system, it's shared.
So how will that work with a covenant house? Do they require to have two separate septic systems?
No, the septic system remain the same. We've made an easement for the septic area, and we have to go to the Board of Health and get them to, okay that.
All right. And then the other question is just kind of going back to this idea of covenant and the fact that we obviously had restrictions that passed away in 1990 without our knowledge. What is the covenant house's restriction? Is it in perpetuity? Does it run with the land for the rest until we are underwater and it's hopefully 3,000 years from now?
Yes.
Or is it die in 20 years?
No.
Go ahead, Andrew, go ahead, or Leslie.
The Covenant House, that particular program that got state approval, has a perpetuity to it. So it is there forever, and that's a government regulation, not a private regulation. So that stays forever.
And where does it show up? Like, does it show up on the deed for
Yes.
the house?
Everything.
Okay, because that's my only worry is having served on other town boards and watched things like that we thought were restricted, and then they fell away for whatever reason. That's my concern, is that all of a sudden it won't be a covenant house anymore, and it'll just be a giant,
Right.
Airbnb.
The monitoring agent is Housing Nantucket, and that's really their mission, their full-time job, is to basically enforce those rules. Sorry.
No, I want to.
All right, thank you.
Good questions.
Okay. Yep.
Hi. Christine Coletti, who's been out way. I think the confusion that we had was, again, like Jason said, was that it gave a different feeling to what was happening out there. And I think maybe my questions have already been answered, but I'm just gonna ask them anyway. Well, one of my questions was, when did this lot 2 become a covenant house? It's not. It's,
Correct,
you're wanting it to be.
correct.
Right.
And, it's 2 lots, 2 separate, proposing, 2 separate ownerships. When and if the big house sells, the covenant, who promises that that other house is going to be for year-round residents? Who is a year-round resident? How, the zoning board is already having some difficulty trying to define what a year-round housing person is. So it's just that crossing, so what has changed for this particular?
So let me go back to staff for a minute.
So the Covenant House is monitored by Housing Nantucket, and they have very specific regulations about income, about how many months a year you have to live in the house, and they closely monitor that. And that's in perpetuity. The other house, the market rate one, is unrestricted.
So if there's 2 houses that 2 people own, correct? How can there be one septic system for 2 houses? Like,
You're allowed to do that.
no, but
You get,
I'm just thinking, like, if somebody sold that first house,
oh no, we have to have an agreement with the Board of Health that it's a shared septic system, we have to get their permission. But you're allowed to have a shared septic system, it's a shared septic system now, it's operating, it's fully functional.
but it's a one owner.
It's correct, it's one owner, yeah.
And, Mr. Chairman, if I may, there would be an easement in place for that, so that would be part of the record recorded at the registry.
Yeah, we showed the easement on the site.
Just to help you know, an easement is an obscure idea, but just think about having a right-of-way over a road. You can have multiple people have rights to use the road, right? So you can set up a legal system that would assure that 2 different people could use it, and probably in that you'd want to provide for maintenance and all the other things. So you're smart to be thinking about contingencies, but they can do it, and it's done pretty routinely. I'm sure the health department keeps an eye on that.
Yeah, they're pretty strict, yeah.
And just one other thing for our Tom Devers area where we live, which we call the subdivision, the 215 homeowners in there. Are you saying now, even though we're lot 3, everybody would say, oh, I want to subdivide?
Don't say that.
Somebody's house?
All right.
Slice it.
Hold
It's
on.
not a subdivision.
Go ahead. I'm going to have you put the appropriate language in
Okay,
that
so,
for it.
so anyone could propose to divide their property through the secondary lot program, which requires a special permit issued by the planning board. So yes, anyone in that neighborhood could propose that.
So what's lot 3? What does that mean? Does that mean
3% ground cover.
120,000 square foot minimum with 3% ground cover.
Most of those lots are
They're either
not conforming.
gigantic or smaller. This one here is restricted just because it's not 3 acres.
Right.
So the zoning is actually restricting the ground cover of this lot. If let's just say that which is never gonna happen, but I'm just being hypothetical, if it went to 1 acre zoning where there's 1 acre lots, you would have 7%. That's never gonna happen. So you've got an anomaly out there. You have humongous lots, way over 3 acres, in 3 acre, that have more ground cover because they're bigger than 3 acres. Then you have all these smaller lots that have 3% of a smaller lot. So they're sort of like indirectly restricted because there's lug 3 over them. So you've got some protection you just don't think about that you've got. Christine.
We know what we have, that's right.
No, I'm just letting you know that. You asked the question, I'm explaining it in my simple way.
Appreciate it.
Simpler than staff, but maybe not as well.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Does that help? Anyone else in the audience wishing to comment on this?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
Just wanted to show that this is the legal ad that went out, and yes, it could be a little confusing, but any type of application of this that is a covenant lot, it is labeled as a secondary.
I know it does.
lot.
I was gonna ask something about this.
That's
Is,
how it's indicated, that's how we advertise it, and we indicate the section within the bylaw, so.
is it a, can I, Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question to staff?
Yep.
On this? Holly, that was awesome. I was thinking exactly, I didn't know you realize you even did this. Should we have staff do like a parentheses covenant program next to the secondary residence? Because it is confusing, even though we understand it. Is
We can do that. It's fine.
Is it appropriate? Because sometimes there's no dwelling. So they're carving out a piece of dirt. It's not a covenant house because there's no house, but technically it's going to be. It's a secondary residential lot.
Maybe we can think about some language to
kind of
include to
change,
make
I
the
don't
legal
know.
ad clearer.
Yeah,
about that.
parentheses, covenant.
Parentheses with covenant to just make it better.
Put something in
I
there.
don't know.
Okay, good. Anything else? What's the pleasure of the board?
I'll make a motion to close. public
Second.
hearing.
Motion's made and seconded to close public hearing. All those, unless there's no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. The pleasure of the board.
Make a motion to approve for staff recommendation.
All right, do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. All right. So that's going to bring us to 7318, which is Thomas Holden and Betsy Holden. Is there anyone here for the applicant for this? Mr. Morey, good evening.
Good evening. So I am the applicant here. I'm the contract purchaser of this property. The property is subject to a special permit from 2012 or 13, which created that small triangle-shaped lot at the bottom of the map there. That special permit included conditions which restricted access to this lot from Bayberry Lane. It also restricted Lot 1, which is the larger parcel on the map, to a single dwelling. At the time that that permit was issued, there was already a second curb cut, one from Rugged Road and one from Bayberry Lane, and there was also a garage apartment. Both of those things continue to exist, and I'm asking you to amend the special permit to allow those things to continue to exist.
Board members, do you have any discussion on this? Yes, ma'am.
I wondered, with looking at the map, whenever we see it, it looks as though there'd be perfectly adequate access through Bayberry and that was the plan to begin with. And I don't know if there'd be any impact on traffic on Rugged Road. Is there a reason you need both? I just wanted to understand. It's not that I'm objecting.
I don't think there would be any impact because it already exists. You know, the same use would continue. I guess I like it because my brother lives over in Beachfront Village, and my wife works at the Lighthouse School.
So it's easy to cut through. Okay.
Daily entrance and exit
Okay.
from the
Thanks for
property.
explaining.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Anything? Leslie, go ahead.
I'd just like to clarify the relief that the applicant is requesting. Wasn't your request to release the front part of the lot? Or did you change that?
To release the front part. No,
So-
there's no, I just want to modify the restrictions in the decision here. So right now, lot 1's restricted to a single dwelling, but
Right.
2 exist already.
It's got
2
it.
existed at the time that this permit was issued. There was the house, and then there's a garage apartment, which is attached in that same structure.
Okay, I misunderstood what you were requesting.
Yeah,
We're good.
that's all this request is.
I guess I don't understand why, at the time, if both of them existed at the time, why would there have been a restriction?
I don't know. I wasn't involved
Original
in the property
subdivision,
then,
maybe?
but I went back and reviewed the building department files and the certificates of occupancy. This house and garage apartment were constructed around 1996, well before this secondary lot provision was created, well before this application was before previous iteration of the board. You know, the only thing I can think is that the staff at the time maybe just made a mistake. I guess 2 mistakes.
It was always a garage apartment as opposed to a garage?
Always a garage apartment, according to the certificate of occupancy and all of the various applications and sign-offs they got.
I have some insight on this.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the tertiary dwelling provision of the bylaw was not adopted until 2015.
Yeah.
This was approved in 2013. And as I said with the previous application, part of the requirements for the secondary lot is that you cannot exceed what would otherwise be allowed under zoning. So only 2 dwelling units total would have been allowed in 2013. So that's why there was a restriction that only each lot could have 1 dwelling. But now we have the tertiary provision. So the 3rd unit would be allowed.
I guess, but that wasn't exactly my question. My question is how they ended up with the restriction in the first place.
Because only 2 dwelling units total were allowed in 2013. 1 on the primary lot and 1 on the secondary lot. It was a standard
Oh,
condition.
I see.
Yeah.
So you're saying it was restricted, I get it. It was restricted because that's what the zoning was at the time.
Yes.
And the zoning, or the bylaw has changed, so now a 3rd would be permitted if we permit it.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Move to close the public hearing?
Well,
Oh.
we didn't even get there yet.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay, but we will in a minute, though. Unless there's nothing else from staff, is there anyone out here who wants to comment on this? Yes, ma'am.
Just wanted some clarification, is, what about the access? Is that being kept? You're wanting that as well, it's an addition to, right?
Correct. I'm looking for 2 modifications here. 1 to allow the existing garage apartment, and 1 to allow the existing driveway access from Rugged Road.
Thank you.
So I just
Yeah.
have a question. Are we looking to do a curb cut for the secondary dwelling lot?
Oh, you
Is
mean
that-
the tertiary, they have? Leslie.
26.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
In the triangle there, are we looking to create a curb cut for
So,
that?
so in the,
They already have that.
the triangle down here,
Yes.
this is an old satellite image that you're looking at. There
Yeah.
already is a house there
Yeah.
with its own driveway.
Okay. Okay.
Which
Above
is a,
the-
I
which
was
is a
confused by the
covenant.
map there.
Yeah,
That's
the
right.
distance between the 2 driveways off Rugged Road is somewhere over 150 feet. You know, they're not right next to one another.
Yep.
Okay. All right, hearing no public comments, the board, I think. is
Move
pretty
to
much-
close the public hearing?
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say
Aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously, and apologize.
Move to approve the applicant's request that would remove the restriction on the property, limiting it to two dwelling units, and to allow access off both Rugged Road and Bayberry Lane.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
to that? Discussion.
Do we
Yes, sir.
need to add, I note at the bottom, there's no site plan, site plan would need to clearly
Okay.
indicate location, ground cover, and everything else. Is that
Good,
something?
good catch. And to require that
A new.
staff approval to include additional specifications as set out in the staff report.
Great.
Second. Please.
Motion's all made and seconded, discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
This is gonna bring us to 7418, which
Oh.
is Constance Gillis and Haley Gillis on 25B Clifton. Is there anyone? Mr. Blackwell, good evening.
Good evening, Jeff Blackwell for the applicant. Earlier in the meeting, you considered the application for a second dwelling on this property and which was approved, and the current application is for an associated driveway for that second dwelling.
Mr. Chair, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Just
You're
a
good.
point of clarification, the second dwelling you all did not approve yet. You need to approve this.
Both.
associated with that.
Correct.
Okay.
It's okay.
As you can see, the GIS image here is of the former Adriana Davidson's dwelling, which has now been moved just to the north and it has been resituated. So the Gillis, the new house for the Gillis is currently under construction, and the driveway which had historically come off of Clifton Street, will basically be maintained in that location. And the second curb cut, which has existed for many years, pre-98, when the special permit requirement was instituted, that driveway existed. So we're formally requesting your recognition and permission to basically maintain that second curb cut, which is associated with the highlighted structure. It's a small one-bedroom second dwelling, and will also serve access for the project's garage.
Okay, great. Thank you. Board members, do you have anything?
This is just jiggling around, that's all.
Anything from staff? Public hearing, ladies and gentlemen, if anyone would like to comment?
Move to close the public hearing.
Do we hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously, and what would you like to do?
Do we, before we make a motion, do we have to approve the second dwelling first?
You're gonna approve the second dwelling right after we do
Right
this.
after, okay,
Right?
just
We're
checking.
gonna- Yep, no, it's
Checking.
okay.
Okay, I'll
Good
make
to
a
ask.
motion to approve the revised plan for the driveway
Okay.
change.
Do I hear a second?
Second. Oh.
Second.
That's what-
You could do third.
I'm used to saying second a lot. tonight.
Tertiary.
Wow.
Motion's made and second for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously, and now we're gonna move on to the second dwelling application for them.
Yeah.
Board members, do you have any questions about
No.
this?
It's the smallest second dwelling I've ever seen.
Yeah,
Mr.
no,
Chair.
please.
Just one question, if I may, Mr. Chair.
No,
Mr. Bible. Jeff, the existing dirt track, I noticed from the other GIS, it looked like there was access to that portion of the lot. Now, is that going to prohibit any kind of restriction as far as access once you make that second dwelling, the curb cut, exclusive for this particular lot?
No, the Davidson family also owns the property to the east, so they're going to access what is Jason's excavation business from another location.
Okay.
Anything else? All right, so board members, what would you like to do with this application?
Move approval.
And do I hear a second?
A second.
Discussion.
Subject to the conditions? Yeah.
The staff recommendation.
Staff recommendation,
Yeah.
great,
Okay.
thank you.
Yep. Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have unanimously. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that's going to bring us to 7518, which is the Wall Street Nominee Trust. Is there anyone? Mr. Wilson, I see you rising. How are you, sir?
Good, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michael Wilson for the applicant. What we have is a condominium-owned property with more or less 3 separate standalone structures that compose the 3 units of the condominium. This would be the second curb cut because 33 Wall Street received, I think the photo in the top left corner of the display there was done this past fall, this late summer, early fall. And because the property is in condo ownership, this is now the second curb cut. it would be the only curb cut on 31 Wall Street.
But the property is,
It would, yes,
Right.
it would take 31 Wall Street's cars, at
Yeah.
least one of them, off of Wall Street. Probably, I think, allowing the board to make a finding that it's going to help the traffic on Walsh.
Yeah.
And it would not significantly impact what Wall Street is. It's Brant Point. We have a number of these small cottages dwarfed by some rather large buildings. And so these cottages, 31, 29, 31, and 33 Walsh, I think, compose the Malloy condominium, are all 1.5-story cottages that this would provide off-street parking for. It's proposed to have the same, it's HDC approved already for the picture that you see in the top left corner, Belgian block apron with a white crushed shell parking area. DPW has also approved the curb cut prior to us coming to you. So we're asking for the finding that it's going to not pose any additional concerns for traffic or back, moving onto Wall Street. I think it'll help it. And that it shouldn't interfere with any of the historical integrity of the area, because it's actually going to make it a nicer view if you don't have these cars, or at least this one car, it's big enough for one space, on Wall Street proper. May have the collateral benefit of providing an additional parking space in town for the neighborhood.
Board members, do you have any discussion? Oh, I'm sorry.
no, nothing.
Any
I just
discussion?
have
Yes.
one question. Is this driveway, I'm just looking at the sketch here, trying to see it as, is it 27 feet long then? So is it for a single car or double space?
If they're going to, most of that Belgian block is within the town's layout. I think
Yeah.
you're going to get possibly 2 cars in there.
2 of Andrew's cars in there.
Small cars. I think it's really going to probably most appropriately accommodate one full-size vehicle.
Okay.
But it is a small cottage, so it's not as though it wouldn't draw multiple cars typically. It's not a typical rental. The homeowners occupy it.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Nothing from staff, I take it. This is a public hearing, although the public is now
Yeah.
small.
I'll move to close the public hearing.
And do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. It's just you make a separate finding, and then we can move on to the application itself.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we find that this isn't adversely affecting the scenic integrity or the contrary to sound traffic and safety considerations.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. And now,
Make a motion to approve the second curb cut.
Second.
discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
My pleasure. That brings us to 7618 Graham Burton on 36 Tomahawk Way. No, huh? Well, there's no one here for the applicants at the moment. I don't know, do you have anything, Holly, you
I
need
have
to?
not been told otherwise, and we received an email.
Which
Okay.
place is this, Holly? Which one? Which one of the projects?
Graham Burton, that is the.
At the
towel
storage
room?
place?
Towel room?
Oh,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I talked with the owner about this,
thank you.
and the original proposal included parking behind the structure, and there's a drainage easement back there, and in order to park, it's going to require a giant retaining wall and all of this stuff. And the building is just for storage of tile materials. So I'm completely supportive of the proposed change to add some parking on the side of the building and the driveway in the front. I think that's fine for the use that is permitted for that structure.
Thank you for helping with that. Board members, do you have any questions at this point?
No. Motion.
Any-
Make a motion to
well,
close the
no,
public
that's-
hearing?
Well, does anyone want to comment?
Oh,
on the
sorry.
public? That's okay.
Nobody's-
I know, but
Motion to close.
kind of have to ask a question.
Motion to close.
And do I hear a second? Discussion, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously, and what would you like to do?
Make a motion to approve the this change in the parking due to the drainage, which we've already seen this before.
Sure.
So again, no.
Second.
Discussion, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Thank you. Okay, well, that takes us out of our public hearing phase, and that's going to bring us into some other business that we have. Over the course of the past few months, we've been starting to talk about proposed policy change for zoning changes for citizen petitions. And I know we had asked staff to take a look at it as well too, based on our last meeting, so where do you want to kick off the conversation at this stage?
Okay, so at the last meeting on the 27th, Fritz brought forward his proposal for policy, and there was a lot of discussion from the board about that. I actually watched the video again this afternoon just to refresh my memory, not of the whole thing, just that part.
Right.
And anyway, the direction that I got, and I felt the same way after watching the video again today, was that the board was more interested in providing perhaps some sort of guidance to potential proponents of articles, with the guidance containing, the type of information that the board would be looking for if they were to give it a positive recommendation. So I took some of the ideas from Fritz's policy document and added some other things to it. And so there's a draft for you to review. And sorry for getting this out last minute, but we had a lot going on, and at least if you can just start the discussion today, that'll make maybe some progress before the November meeting.
Sure.
Oh.
I received this a little bit earlier today, and took a look at it, and I did respond to Leslie, basically, and it was late in the afternoon, so I don't know whether she responded, but I didn't really expect that I'd necessarily have one by the meeting. So my question back to her to Leslie was, is this intended to be informational to somebody who was going to make a proposal, to elicit information for us to make a determination? My thought would be, I like this, but it would still be my intent that we actually have a policy that would guide the board in making the decision. So it was my idea that, in fact, what I had provided, or something similar to it, would be the guidelines, would be the policy, so that if a citizen's petition came before it, we would basically look down A through F, and if it didn't qualify under A through F, we would not give it a favorable recommendation. I like what this is, which Leslie's provided, which gives them some idea of what it is that we're looking for, because to make a determination, we would need information. And she is eliciting, her form elicits that information. But unlike, I think, what Leslie assumed we were doing, or was is proposing, or thought that where the board was going, is that I was actually also still looking for a policy. So
if I understand this, you're looking for a checklist. In order for us to support as the planning board, we would have to meet all the check requirements, and then we could endorse it or give it a favorable recommendation. If it didn't check all of the boxes, then we would just allow it to go as a citizen on their own merits without a favorable.
Correct. We're not restricting. Obviously, we can't keep anybody from going. It's simply we are setting in writing ahead of time a set of ground rules that we will follow when we get one of these petitions, and rather than looking at the petition and then just, without any written guidelines, making a decision, which could vary from time to time, or perhaps vary. My concern would be that it could vary, you know, it could be similar, but, you know, in one case you might say yes, in another case you might say no. So really, the impetus to this is to try to get to a situation in which we are not always endorsing a citizen's petition so that it can continue to come back year after year after year if defeated, if you're following me.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a number, you know, several of those where something gets defeated at the town meeting, doesn't pass, because the board has given it a favorable recommendation, it can come back again. So that's the background from this, but I think if we're going to do that, it's only fair that we set forth the written criteria that we're going to base it on so that somebody knows ahead of time exactly what it is that we're likely to say about their petition. Again, we're not prohibiting them from doing it. We're simply saying these are the conditions under which we will give a favorable recommendation to a citizen's proposed, or to a proposed change in use or whatever under the zoning bylaw. And I agree that in order to do that, we should be asking them for information. Why do you think this satisfies the criteria that we've set up?
So, correct me if I'm wrong though, if it doesn't receive a favorable recommendation by this board, it doesn't move forward to town meeting.
No, yes, it does.
Well, it could under
Unless it
this.
came back within 2 years.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
The difference would be this.
Yeah.
If we did not give it a favorable recommendation,
Yeah.
and it's defeated at town meeting,
Right.
then they can't come back the next year with the same proposal.
Or at a special, in that,
Or yes.
within that 2-year thing. And by the way, can I ask?
That's okay. They can come back with significant modification to it. There's a difference there, and that's why I want staff to be able to explain that. Is that if they make there's a certain threshold where they can make modifications to it, which would allow it to come back. Okay.
If it is, it is.
Okay. No, I just want to be. I want to be clear on it that. You know, it's not just a done deal at that point. That there are certain thresholds they can.
I understand that.
Okay.
What I'm doing here has no bearing on that whatsoever.
Okay. No. Okay, I wasn't clear.
It is whatever it is. You know,
Okay.
If they can bring it back, they can bring it back. In the case we've seen, and specifically, you know, it's the
Malcolm
Number
property.
2 list.
yeah.
That is going to
That
get.
was coming back.
It's going to be a lot worse.
Without any change whatsoever. Right? So.
I mean, Mr. Chairman, can I almost want to respond a little bit to this. Fritz, I totally appreciate your efforts. You know, putting in time to this stuff, whether it's physical, mental, typing, thinking, driving around. Look, I mean, it's all time. Okay. So I'm going to make a comparison to something. The Sewer Act, 2006. When did that happen? 2006, 2007. We have gone from one complete extreme to the other with sewer in through 2 different pendulums, actually 4 pendulum swings if you count early 2000s. Then we've in the last few years we want everyone to hook up. We've run sewer to the middle of nowhere. We're making people rip septics out of their yard by force. And last night we're saying no. After we said yes. Now we said no in the mid-2000s. We had moratoriums. We could have kept David here all night. Red Sox are on soon, which is I can't wait. I can't believe it's only 20 minutes of 8. This is exciting. And we had a restriction on hookups. There's a septic pump station across from my house that was put at the highest point of the property area so no one would hook up. 10 years later, the whole street wants to hook up. It's like we just keep changing. So when you make now hold on, you don't know what I'm gonna say yet. The hard, fast criteria checklist, that word checklist was used during the Sewer Act. And it has all been changed. Not all of it, but parts of it. There was a ruling by the selectmen at the time, there were selectmen. We don't wanna open streets up for a sewer cut because of not getting it put back right, and they had all these rules, and all of a sudden, there's a place on Cliff Road that's in an emergency, and they had to open the street. So it's like, I agree with a checklist, but I don't necessarily agree with if there's one box that can't be ticked for an article that we shouldn't consider it as positive. That I don't agree with. To that level, like there could be a reason that it made sense that may not be on that list for a specific area. And I can't give you an example of that right now, but there is a lot of different things that come up. Area plans, the area plan stuff, we didn't even get into with Tom Neves because we went to the nth degree to get that right. That stuff about the 1,500 square feet over that was all part of that area plan. That stuff had come up, you know. But, I mean, I think we should be stricter with the articles. I think we should be more diligent with repetitiveness stuff, not necessarily because of what we think public sentiment is. Public sentiment 5 years ago was the polar opposite of what it is right now. And you know what's going to happen in 5 more years? It's going to be the polar opposite again. Guarantee it, okay? I can feel it coming already. So I think we should keep working on this. I think that we should have a checklist, but I don't think we should make it to the point where we miss one tick and make it negative. That's my personal opinion right now. Okay, but I do agree that we should be not just saying, yeah, this guy's cool. We're just going to say, yep, we like this. I get that. Okay, I'm not totally opposed. I just don't know how far we should go to be that tight. That's all.
If I could just bump in here, because I feel like these two things are being treated a little bit separately, and I really commend Leslie for what she's put together here. I think these two things in tandem ensure that, you know, as we heard last night, people don't really have guidance, they don't know how to write these things. I think this really is very helpful, and I think it comes out of Fritz's proposed piece, so that when these come before us, structurally, they're already sort of meeting these guidelines. Am I wrong there? I mean, that's the way I sort of feel that these two things work together. If I wanted to do something, write a citizen's petition that's going to come in front of the board or something, I would get this. I would be going through and making sure that my piece satisfied these things. And through that effort, the A through F, sorry, I took my glasses off. The A through F would be essentially have a better chance of already being met. And then the person who's putting together, or people, or non-government body, or whatever, have had an opportunity to really consider all the pieces that they're doing, and then they can present their best effort. And I think it has a much better chance of just sort of, okay, good, this is good. Not only do we have the information, but the people presenting it have had to think it through, had to look things up, and are more aware of you know, what zoning district they're in, or what's allowed, or that kind of thing. I noticed last night that I have to say thank you for allowing me to be on the board as an alternate, so that I can get both sides, so that I can go, yeah, why didn't you come to the public hearing? You know, whereas I would have previously sort of thought, well, why should I go to all of them? But anyway, I just wanted to say that I think these two pieces work very nicely together to help the applicant in terms of their own education and writing a piece that could be more acceptable, not just for us, but for the townspeople as well. People would have a better understanding of what was being presented, et cetera.
I'd just like to say, Fritz, I think it's a great idea. I think it's actually the way it's going to be presented to us when we go over all the applications. It's going to make it easier when we can say, 8 of the 10 boxes have been checked off. Now let's focus on the 2 that weren't. For what reason? Doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to support it, but it's going to make our review much, much easier. And I think the only thing that we really need to do is focus on the checkpoint questions that we want to ask to make and we can review those. We have a list before us of ideas, and I think further review and going over the pertinent questions to ask will make everyone's life easier, the applicants and also our review. So thank you very much. I think it's a great idea.
Go ahead. I'm going to go back to you, Nat. I don't think, maybe you said this, Fritz, but that's not the way I understood it, that you have to check every box to get a resolution from the board. This reads as though these are factors, and that's what I thought.
I don't know which list you're looking at. This one.
The new draft.
No, you wouldn't have to have all of these.
Yeah.
No, so
I'm looking at the draft.
what
I'm
I
sorry.
would suggest.
I didn't bring them.
That's what I would say you have to meet. Not
Well,
all of this.
To your point.
I think
Well,
I'm
you
trying.
set a policy.
Can you hold on?
Okay, no,
Hold on,
Yep, no, no.
please.
I'm advocating for 2 different things. One is transparency. This is transparency for the public, so they know what's going on, and then accountability for us, so that we have some kind of statement of what we're going to look at, and we can try to be as consistent as possible and as fair-minded as possible. And I can see that this is a useful piece of it, but I agree that it's helpful to have a companion policy that says, here are factors that we would take into account as we assess these things. Fritz, I know you want a policy, and I know there's some difference between this list and the list you started with. Am I correct in understanding that you would see a policy as not necessarily dispositive, that it would be a consideration of the stated factors, and it wouldn't be like a recipe or a chemistry experiment that you had to meet each one of them?
No, I'd be willing to, I think, first of all, I appreciate your comments. I really think we're making progress in terms of what I was trying to get done. I want to make sure we're all on the same page. I wasn't suggesting that what Leslie drafted, you'd have to meet every single one of those requirements. It was more the separate ones that I had provided before. I'm quite happy. What I'd like to do is, at this point, I'd like to have us adopt, or not adopt, we may not need to adopt, but I would like to have us direct the staff that they should use what Leslie has put together for anybody who's coming forth with a proposal, so that the information comes back to us for us to be able to make a decision. I'd like this to be, whether it's called a formal or informal or an adopted policy.
How about guidelines?
Yeah. Guidelines. I guess what I'd like to do is, I'd like to say, okay, but can we also just keep this in our folder so that when we actually go through it, we look at these and let's see how it works. If this ends up being too stringent, and if we find cases that Nat might be talking about, where there's some reason to have an exception from it, then we can do that. Let's just have it there to look at, to say, okay, these are kind of the principles, but it doesn't necessarily mean if there's a question about one of them that we won't. How about if we move it that way and then see how it works for the town meeting?
And for an example, I just thought of one of this Wyatt Way thing that got all the controversy. And when we go back, and staff has the unique ability to go back through the history of how these lots were changed back weird stuff, not like the 4181L stuff. I'm talking about what it was before, some of the changes that were made. Those kind of decisions can be in the checklist in a way that's broader because there's special circumstance that you have to just, you know, it isn't the traditional stuff that you're basically talking about. There's
Okay.
some things that are
So
odd,
we can
especially
sort
in
of
the,
add a G.
yeah, especially,
Except in special
yeah,
circumstances.
in the
How's that
art,
work
in
for
the
you?
historic areas, some of the stuff we've done in Sconset, there's been a few weird ones that like extended some of the SOH or,
Yeah.
so those are the ones that I get concerned with being all of a sudden like building over the island when it's not. It's stuff that was, it's still in flux a little bit. So that's, but I'm good with it being,
Okay, so I would say
guideline. I
then,
like the word guideline. I think that's
yeah,
better.
I'm happy if we basically
Yeah.
take, you know, use the one for the questionnaire. Keep mine, what I have proposed, with sort of the amendment of except in special circumstance. So basically what it would say, what I would think it would say, or how we would apply it would be, except in special circumstances, these are the criteria that we would look to make a determination as to whether we are going to make a favorable recommendation. That,
And one more question through Barry to staff on
Yeah,
this
go ahead,
whole
I'm fine.
thing. The discussion came up and it kind of went away and came back when Fritz originally brought this idea, was planning board adopting, you know, taking a citizen article or a citizen, you know, potential article and making a planning board sponsored article. Some of that stuff was part of because it used to be, there was a little pendulum on this too, where they should all be planning board articles. Then we kind of switched and said, well, the public really should be doing this because it was a better feel at town meeting. And now it kind of can go back and forth. That is something that I think is up to staff when they talk to the person. They're a little nervous about speaking, calling an article, that type of stuff. But I think that this checklist or guideline sort of fits something that we would sponsor with. Maybe it's something that you guys are working on with a bigger picture, Andrew, with CN versus this or some other change that we're making. When it become a planning board article instead of a citizen article. Or you already have that in your, you know, way of doing it. I'm just sort of asking.
So I think
Follow
what
my
we've been
question.
doing in recent years is if a citizen comes forward and is interested in, you know, getting an article on the warrant sponsored by the planning board, if it's consistent with some initiative that we would have
May have been working
done anyway,
Yeah.
then we'll put it on the list for the planning board to consider. But if it's something that's just a reasonable proposal but doesn't really further any true planning objectives, then we'll suggest that they pursue that as a citizen petition.
And that sort of fits into this guideline as well.
I think-
That's good.
I think Judith mentioned it also, transparency. It really helps the voters when we stand up at the meeting. It's already almost been vetted where, you know, they're not looking like we're undermining something and trying to slip something through, where they've met the public, you know, this is transparency. And I think it helps us and it gives us a favorable credibility, exactly. So, you know, I can't think of too many negatives as long as we have that flex to, just because it doesn't meet a guideline, we still can talk about something. And if we ultimately don't give it a favorable recommendation to sponsor it, the citizens can still bring it up and present it at the town meeting through whatever, and ask for an amendment of something and speak on their own behalf.
I would just suggest we make a note to ourselves that after the annual town meeting, say at the May meeting, that we review how well this worked and just consciously kind of debrief ourselves about how well it went and what we observed from the town meeting that we might want to add in or modify or something like that.
Yep.
anyone else?
I've been very patiently quiet.
You want to speak
No,
up?
because I believe that's really, that I wanted to step back for a little bit and just hear what y'all have to say. That's important. But I agree with Judith, I agree with John, that this is good. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for bringing this forward. Two things I'd say is, one is that I think we've used a lot of these guidelines in the past. We've just never really formally brought it to that level where it's in print.
It's on paper, yeah.
So to me, that's a good thing. And I honestly see the document that Leslie did getting him down to this second stage. It should eliminate a lot of the stuff in between, which is great. But as you've said too, I view these as living documents. It's not like today, this is done, never to be seen again. No, like any of the other things that we do, there are going to be times where we need to go back and recraft them or rethink about what we're doing. So that to me is always an important thing to do. Never just say etched in stone. No. Stone can be changed.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
So I really just want to say you guys have done some tremendous work. I love it. It's good stuff. Yep. So
You want some kind of a vote?
yeah,
or-
we're gonna officiate this into a slightly more than just the dialogue we've had at this point. And you guys can catch me if I'm out of line here. So I think what would be good is for the board to adopt both documents at this point regarding citizen petitions. Keep it simple. Does that work, Andrew and Leslie, from your perspective as well?
With the understanding there are guidelines, and
Right.
that not every item has to be checked in every instance.
All right, and
is that all right? Just
No,
that's. I thought. I just want to be sure there's no uncertainty in the future because some of these words, like checklists, can carry different meanings to different people.
It leaves room for discussion.
Right. And so I'd say in Fritz's document that's covered. It does say the word guidelines in there. There you go. And maybe in the document that you created, citizen petition guidelines, period, for zoning, you'll find the place for it, yes. Yes, ma'am.
My only concern with the policy is that, everyone, that there's no perception that the planning board is sort of predisposed to making a recommendation on something before they've actually reviewed what's proposed. Or talked about the specifics during a public hearing. Like you all have been talking about, like going through and just checking the boxes, which, we've talked about, you don't have to check all the boxes, but I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page with, it may still get a positive recommendation, even if it doesn't meet all the criteria in the Fritz document. That's the one
I
that
think
I'm
it's a
talking
tool
about.
to assist. It's a guideline for someone. It's really a tool. And I think a lot of people that were thinking about maybe bringing in a citizen petition, they'll look at this, they'll go through it and realize they only meet 4 of the, so many checklists, and they will actually give up the fact because they don't meet that guideline. I think it's going to help us, to govern itself. It's going to limit what they do. And I just wanted to make this one point. There was a gentleman that stood up a couple of times last night, and it didn't sit well with me, his comments. He said unbridled development, and he directed it towards the town boards. And I think that was really disingenuous of what we do. We're not just making a free-for-all, as everyone will see. We're really looking at things on a case-by-case basis. We're seeing the merits of them, how the setbacks are. And even in today's meeting, we're looking at a specific instance where we're given an approval for something that meets the criteria without expanding something and actually is undersized what they possibly can do. And I don't think the town, when they show up for a town meeting, attended any of these meetings here throughout the year, understand that, and they make a comment of unbridled development without fully realizing what we go through. And I think this is a guideline that will be a tool to assist them. I couldn't be more happy, so that's what I'd like to say.
Just to follow up on your point, what governs that is either Mass General law or bylaws that have been approved and enacted by this town.
2/3.
Absolutely, 2/3.
Bingo.
And I know, and I agree with you, that 2/3 is always a tough criteria to meet, but it's not that these things are done willy-nilly in a vacuum. So,
Just to follow
Yes, ma'am.
through to Leslie's point, would it be helpful to have in Fritz's document some added sentence that says something like, the board will always have an open mind in handling public hearings related to possible warrant articles. After hearing all the evidence, the board will consider the following factors in making its decision about whether to recommend or how to
Yeah.
dispose of a proposal.
Leslie could.
I think
clean
that's a
that
great
up.
amendment.
Is that all right with you?
I think we're so damn close, it's not even funny at this
No,
point.
I thought that would do it.
No,
you're
and
right.
I think what I might say is, let's move ahead with these. Okay, let's do what we've started out to do at this point. Like I said, it's a living document, so next month, we'll just fine tune in that last piece and see if we're good with it. Does that seem reasonable for you all?
Yep.
Sure. Yes, sir.
I actually was bumping up against my self-imposed 101 word limit. But since you're gonna vote on things, I wanted to ask two questions. One is of Leslie, just simply, Leslie, I guess I was just kind of curious. First of all, this is great.
Oh, thank you.
It builds on everything everyone has said. Judith, I think you put it well, John, in your follow-ups and so on and so forth. But with respect to one very simple item, your attendance at the planning board meeting is expected, although not required, so that you can present your proposal and respond to questions, etc. It seems to me that there's always an issue amongst the board members.
Yeah.
No one came to
Or
talk.
how
So
about
I'm
the
just
word
wondering, although not required, I think the people who aren't going to show up anyways. But if we put it in there, it might invite people not to. So I just asked you to consider that. And then the other and I just want to put these two out there for you guys, to the extent you may or may not want to discuss them. Fritz, on yours, again, I think, building the transparency and having a process is important. Having the fluidity to be making decisions that are receptive to the public hearing process are important too. So all good discussion and amendments. But with respect to F, the property, one of the guideline requirements is that the property subject of the proposed amendment is in compliance with all applicable zoning bylaws. I know you know that a subpart of the bylaw stipulates you may not be. There are circumstances under which you are allowed not to be in compliance with the zoning bylaw, which is pre-existing non-conforming.
Yeah.
You meant to include that, or?
No, I meant
No.
zoning, I really meant violations.
Okay, so
Zoning violations.
So I just wanted to have that be clarified. So
Yeah.
those were the-
Bylaw versus districts.
Those are the two
Is really
comments.
the
Yeah,
difference,
no,
yeah.
I meant violations.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just to go to your point, I hear what you're saying about the being in attendance, because again, that's always been one of my biggest things.
You could insert the word
What-
representation, maybe,
Or strongly encourage.
something like that.
I think it's important for either that, again, you're not gonna get the information unless they're here or representatives here.
Yeah, that's,
And like I said too, if we're gonna support something, I love the idea, but the most important factor I've found is that when we get to town meeting as well, that they be there. When they're not there, there just seems to be a big difference between those two. When the person who's proposed it is there at times. I'm not saying it always works in the positive,
it's happened
but
to 3 or 4.
I wonder, is
Yeah.
it possible that you'd allow a phone call if it's not a public hearing as such? I mean, I'm just
Yeah.
thinking about somebody who owns property and they're off island. If we're doing this in February or whatever, that's not ideal, but either that or if they've talked to the staff sufficiently that they
Family
have to
member
have
or-
talked to the staff by phone or some other kind of intermediate thing if it's impossible to be in
and
in
that's
person.
where I'm tracking to, a representative thereof,
Yeah.
and that could theoretically be staff as well too. And, yeah, but again, someone who's gonna, yeah, kind of come back at us and say,
That's tricky for staff because it puts them in they're here independently advising us, and if they have to carry water for somebody else,
and
but
I'm just trying to
Yeah.
work with you guys. I'm trying to think how that all, that's a good point. Yes?
Just to give some insight, with my experience when I was a planner in South Carolina, whenever anybody was coming for a rezoning, obviously a different format of government, but in case, it was strongly encouraged that somebody was there to represent. No ifs, ands, or buts. And if nobody couldn't represent, then that moved on. Sorry, it won't move forward. So I don't know if there's something that you want to think about in that regard. So, try encourage the participation of somebody to represent. Make it that it's. I like the word you were saying, strongly encouraged. There's definitely a way we can get it across.
So can I make it, just since I brought it up, I want to follow up. So I would suggest that perhaps it says your attendance at the planning board meeting is expected, either yourself or through a representative, so that you can present your proposal and respond to questions or issues, ... The idea being that, again, as you said, Mr. Chairman, it is a living document. We kind of see where it goes. If we need to, I think Holly's, the concept of strongly recommended is good too. I'm just trying not to make a bunch of changes to, I just really think this was good work.
Okay, we'll add something.
Yeah, so let me ask you a question. What would prevent them from using this telephone sitting right here if they can't be here?
Or having an attorney represent them, some form
No,
of representation.
We've never done that. I'm just saying,
I
yes, ma'am.
think that's at the discretion of the chairman, and I think that's something you'd want to think about
There's gotta be.
at a policy level. Like, is that something that you want to allow?
I think
Or maybe
there-
under special circumstances?
I'm calling it
We
in
have
from now
consultants,
on.
so.
And sir, what would be the 5
Watching the
reasons
game.
underneath that you can explain to this board that are extenuating circumstances?
It certainly would be a useful tool. I don't think we should preclude our use of tools that we can use, but I agree with Leslie that it's, see what
Yeah,
happens.
let's maybe not put that in, but let's see where it takes itself off to.
I think that's always something that could be considered in a special circumstance.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we should leave that to the chair and staff to recommend in particular cases if needed. If somebody's in Florida and their child has smallpox, or the boats aren't running and the planes aren't running and it's the last minute and there's a northeaster, maybe a phone call would be welcome. Maybe we could,
I just don't want to hear the waves of the opening of a Corona happening.
Time to go home, huh?
So I didn't mean to get us too granular, but if I could make a motion to go ahead and make the approvals, I would, but it's not my place.
It really should be with the 5 members. I appreciate what you're doing, but it really was with
But
the 5 members.
you want to hold it till next time, till we have finalized language, is that right? We could,
It's up to you. It really
I
is up to
move
the
that
5
we have, that we approve in concept the 2 documents we've been discussing with possible amendments to be incorporated by staff between now and next time, but that we accept it and approve it in principle tonight.
I'm liking that thought, you guys.
I'm kind of rewritten this. I don't know whether.
You give it to them and let's not slow
yeah.
it down.
Let them
And
hammer
some
it out.
people
Second
want
Judith's
the
motion.
Red Sox, I think.
So the motion's now made and seconded. Discussion on the issue? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye? Please
Aye.
say
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. It did show.
Nice show.
Thank you. All right, so Judith brought up about the scorecard discussion thing, and I think you have a handout
could-
at the moment.
I thought this was map amendments. I'd be amazed if the staff was able to have worked on that on top of everything else.
No, I think that was carried over inadvertently.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
from the last meeting.
I'm in no
Oh,
rush
okay.
on that. The one, if I
So
get.
that's just a typo then, kinda, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I think when we took it up last time, we said it'd probably take 2 months for you to think about that.
Okay.
We talked about quarterly.
I would just add, I talked to the leaders of the Civic League to tell them we were working on this and ask their opinion, because particularly Peter Morrison is very into data and all that stuff. And they suggested possibly adding a column about whether the approvals are within the sewer district or not. maybe within water district or not, just if we're thinking about utilities. But I think once we get a beginning of something staff recommends, we may want to get additional occasions to review what we think about. But I didn't see that as urgent compared to some of the rest.
Okay. All right, so you want to do an update on the ZBA letter?
So for the ZBA, they did submit an alternative proposal. They've reduced the density. We will be looking for a revised letter from the planning board. We're not ready for that right now. But between now and the next meeting, we'll work on a draft, and it would be helpful if you all familiarize yourself with the changes. They're all online on the ZBA page.
Are they dealing with the 7-page pictures, or is there something more fully fledged that has been submitted? Not yet.
Not yet.
Just for myself, I don't think it's really worth a lot of people's time to try to deal with what's basically a pretty minimal depiction, but I wondered if anybody has an idea when something more concrete would be submitted, and maybe we should plan ahead, if it's in order, Mr. Chair, to set up a special meeting to go through it, enough ahead of time, so especially as we're pushing toward holidays, that we might be able to do that. They extended it by agreement till January, the decision point for the ZBA, right? But I imagine it'd probably be good, just because of holidays and all, to try to get a couple of points on the calendar like that. And I frankly think if they don't provide full information, it's really very difficult to do anything meaningful. Plus, you folks have better things to do than deal with incomplete materials, so.
Okay, so update on warrant articles?
Does everyone, we are working on a chart for the articles that we've discussed. So again, if anyone has their own ideas, we'd like to hear them, if they're going to be proposed through the planning board. So time is getting close here on that. I think we talked a little bit, or maybe individually. You all have been given the calendar for the upcoming town meeting. You should familiarize yourself with those time frames. We, at some point, will need to have a discussion with the Board of Selectmen. I don't know if we've scheduled that yet. We've shared with them our preliminary list of warrant articles, so at least they have a general idea. So, again, if there's any feedback
I
on
would
that.
just go back to the one we were on sort of at the end of that working meeting we had, the end of September, the one about, is there a way to have a prototype for distributed smaller 4-unit developments, one of which might be designated for affordable housing as part of a density trade or something of that sort. We had a pretty good discussion of it. I regret I didn't get to review all the minutes from that, but if we could put that one back on for the next meeting, I'd appreciate it. And there may be a couple of others. Is your preference to get kind of a paragraph ahead of time as a way to, okay.
Yeah.
Was that about the workforce housing bylaw to kind of modify it a little bit? I'm
Well,
trying to, I never
you were
remember the
pretty
conversation.
enthusiastic, but as I recall, the idea for me was, I think I gave the example of Quidnet should have some affordable housing. You said,
Oh.
now you remember.
I do, but I meander a lot.
The idea in my mind was, could you have a system that said, I'm picturing a prototype that could be like a 4-unit, commonly used kind of cottage package, that if you had one of the 4 being affordable, you could have 4. If you didn't have one that's affordable, it would be 3. I think that came off the discussion of tertiary dwellings and having them in what sometimes feels like a mini apartment arrangement.
Yeah.
And part of what I was thinking, I happened to be on a board with a bunch of architects, so I talked to them about affordable housing and about bringing module structures in as a way to be less expensive, certain kinds of development, and sort of even have thought, could there be some kind of design competition that would be interesting that the historic district could think about and get behind, that would make it simpler to have distributed housing, so we're not dealing with just big blockbusters like the 40B we've been looking at. And that may not be feasible, but if we don't have a smaller scale multifamily option that is recognized probably with a permit, not as of right, we may be impeding ourselves from moving toward having more dispersed affordable housing. And I think everybody would probably agree having more dispersed affordable housing is better than having it all crammed in one area. That was my recollection. That may not match others, but
No, it came out of that
about
thing
the
about
tertiary.
across from the high school and some of the
Right.
misinformation that's going on. People think that's a 40B. It's not. It's a workforce housing bylaw, but it's only in the CN and the R5. I've personally mentioned this a couple of times, that the workforce housing bylaw is still in its infancy as far as how that was created in November of 2015, correct, Andrew?
2015.
Yeah, and I think that what you're saying, Judith, is that taking that special permit ability to have 4 kitchens on a lot instead of 3 could be made better. I mean, I think that that's the answer to a lot of this that we are getting.
Another one, and this may be too off the wall for Nantucket, but I followed other places that are high price places to be, and I know some places. I have my niece in Hartford, Connecticut, that I've read about, South San Francisco, have moved toward what I would call more congregate housing, that would be shared living room, shared kitchen, and then different scale of either 2-room kind of apartments, but without the need for the common spaces, and instead shared common space. And it seems to me that's a worthwhile model for older people, for younger people with kids. My niece and her husband and a couple of their other friends share childcare, share cooking duties and things like that. And that, in my mind, that's not a hippie commune. Maybe will be when all the pot arrives. I can't promise that, but I think that that's a wise stewardship if you're trying to lighten your footprint in a way that we should be thinking about innovative things like that. I think either Andrew or Leslie, one of you told me, or someone told me, that there were a group called Nantucket Creatives that had a similar idea some time back, and then they kind of fell by the wayside. But that still seems to me to be a very viable thing, that, say, somebody who's widowed who likes kids might have a unit there and might chip in childcare in return for some reduction in food costs, or I don't know what, but I think the community would like some alternatives. Those may be too off the chart, I don't know, but.
Is the thought on this ownership type units or rental or both, or?
The ones I've seen some of each. If you want me to dig around and try to find some more info, I can. I think that I certainly would believe and say, as a lawyer, you better have some good documents about what happens when people get divorced or die, or whatever else that way. But as a rental structure, it seems to me you could start with a rental structure like that and then move into condo kind of structure in a way. Especially with the number of employee housing demands we have, and the number of people who seem to be crammed into small spaces together, it seems to me there's at least a thought experiment to imagine people are living together. So how do we make that work and be sure the health and safety considerations are taken into account?
I think a lot of the you know, I go into a lot of places that were built in the 90s, in the late 80s. The building code now and the way things are, it's almost, it's totally different than it was. And that kind of addresses some of that. I mean, I'm not saying the people
Right.
don't have a potential issue. I'm talking about the structure.
Right.
And the way things are done now is a lot different than it was. We're gonna continue to see, and this is a good conversation, we're gonna continue to see tear downs of even stuff that was built not long ago. I'm telling you, it's going to happen.
It's
Because
happening.
the stuff is rotten. Rats. It's unbelievable. And it's not the people that caused that. It's the structure and how things were done with
It's the old
ventilation
building
and the
code.
sides of the building, and they find a little way to get in. I saw something a few months ago that scared me, what was going on at this house that got bought. And it's getting fixed by a couple local guys right now. They're killing themselves to do it. But there's going to be a lot of new land in the mid-island. So this kind of conversation, based on, I know what you're thinking of that triplex, but it
Well,
has
that's
teeth.
where I started.
I know it is,
But
and I agree with you about the way it looks versus what it is and all that. But I think Andrew, having this conversation about this now with the island, you know, saying it's in favor of housing, but it doesn't really seem that way. We have to get through this period. Trust me, been through this before. This is going to happen again in another 10 years. We're going to find ourselves again, and it'll all kind of work out.
Well,
and I think this is a good time to incubate some of this stuff.
especially if the market's been falling the last couple of days, but at some point, the real estate market isn't going to be what it has been, and at that point, people are going to need to sell because they've stretched too far. So it's also a way to think ahead of what's going to happen when you suddenly have a lot of vacancies.
Yeah.
And people are taking a hit because there's ways that could be a very functional plan to have ahead of time so that you ease that kind of injuries that are going to result. Time to see Red Sox, I guess.
I don't know, they're not on. I was totally wrong on Saturday.
Well, I'm sorry that.
I can't believe it. My son just corrected me. I thought it was tonight.
All right, so just keep in mind that if you've got some things you want to propose, that there is a deadline that's going to come up for it. Just one last thing.
Go ahead.
Non-public hearing item deadline change, Holly, Catherine, did you guys want to?
Yeah, that was the 2-week deadline that Holly referenced earlier. So
Right.
anything that doesn't require a public hearing right now is due 1 week before the meeting. We're
Yeah.
gonna go back to 2 weeks. That will give us more time to
Excellent.
revise plans and other stuff that we're
Super.
very, very excited about this. I have no idea.
So that includes second dwellings and
Holly, a lot more
A&Rs,
time to
right?
review it.
Very excited.
Second dwellings and A&Rs.
All non-public, even Form J's, all those previous plans, things. That way it'll give us adequate time, even discuss with, say, Ed.
Right.
Sometimes
Great.
we're pushing Ed at the last minute as well, so this will help all across
Okay.
the board.
Yeah.
Good.
So-
Just
Long time coming.
just a question for staff. Andrew, you had at one point passed out some zoning maps that had circles and lots of circles around them. Are those, I don't think, are part of this spreadsheet?
Yeah, go ahead.
Some of them are.
I think
We have a lot of the maps drafted, and I had intended to bring those tonight, but they were out of order, and I was in a hurry to get here, but I would be happy to email them out.
no, I just,
But do they
I
do
just
they
wanna
cue
make sure,
into
'cause
this?
those
Is this matrix reflecting what's on the maps?
The map that are you talking about the map with all the